Hey, I'm Alex, and welcome to Hallucination. If you love true horror stories, consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. The stories you'll hear are shared by our audience from Reddit, and to keep their original essence, I read them exactly as they were written. Before we begin, let me know in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? Also, check the timestamps in the comments for story titles and easy navigation. Now, let's dive into the darkness. Refracta persona. After my granddad's recent spur-of-the-moment decision to move abroad, it fell to me and my brother to sort through the old barn beside his home. By the looks of its interior, he'd been using it as storage, with a mishmash of boxes, antique furniture, and a battered old pickup truck filling the dusty structure. We began our 4-day-long clean-out, with the intention of finding some expensive relic that would have made the labor worth it. Initially, we expected a free-for-all, with multiple members of our family coming to claim whatever was inside the barn. Evidently, a box of old jewelry and a set of power tools were the only things of value, and no one was crossing state lines for them. On our last day, having reached the back wall, I tore down a thick white tarp which covered a corner of the room. Underneath the surprisingly dense, mesh-like cover was a large rustic oak mirror. The almost 2-meter-tall, arched mirror glistened as the thin rays of light pierced the decaying roof above. Its perimeter was adorned with a spiral, branching leaf-like pattern encrusted with a set of seemingly runic letters. Maybe it was good fortune, but Ebony had been pestering me for a full-length mirror before undertaking the cleanup. Slapping it, bound in the tarp, in a handful of boxes into my trunk, if nothing else, at least I wouldn't have to buy a brand new mirror. Placing it on the landing, I admired the design and reveled in the fact that I could cross off 2 tasks today. While staring deeply into the mirror, my reflection seemed a little uncanny. The silhouette in front of me was practically identical, though my proportions seemed ever so slightly off. Checking the mirror and eyeballing whether the glass was straight, my face was only an inch or 2 from its surface. As I scanned, the right side of my face felt a fraction warmer, not to the extent it was obvious, rather the feeling of warm breath on my cheek. Pulling back, the reflection seemed to react a millisecond slower, lagging behind just enough to get me to question if I was in fact hallucinating. A loud call averted my attention downstairs to Ebony, arriving home. With one short glance back at the mirror, I pushed those thoughts out of my mind, justifying what I'd seen as a trick of the light or my lack of energy from the cleanup. Ebony approved of the mirror, saying I did a good job, and now that's sorted, I can finally book an appointment with the opticians. She even liked the runic letters, saying that they gave a rustic look to its design, though neither of us could read them. Unlike myself, she didn't get any of the same strange feelings when viewing the mirror, which only confounded my previous excuses. That evening, sometime in the early morning, I got up to use the bathroom. Our landing is set out like a rectangle with 3 doors and the staircase in each corner. With the mirror facing the staircase placed at the back wall, you wouldn't have a reason to view it on the way from the bedroom to the bathroom door. On my way back from relieving myself, rubbing my eyes from the bright LED lights of the bathroom, I quickly flicked my gaze up, being startled by movement ahead of me. Obviously, I wasn't used to perceiving my own reflection yet, especially not in the early hours of the morning. Oddly though, my movements in the reflection seemed forced. The only way I can describe it is if a person was attempting to copy your walking pattern as you moved, occasionally stepping too fast or slow, but not enough to be overtly noticeable. Again, I was tired, and with my brain nagging me back to the comfort of the warm bed, I obliged. The next week moved slowly, but my mind got used to the mirror. Other than an incident with a missing pair of socks that I attributed to my poor eyesight, nothing much happened. We had been play-fighting over who should take the washing upstairs, and Shed thrown a pair of socks at me. With my superhuman reflexes, I dodged her missile and heard the faint sound of it collide with the mirror upstairs. After dropping off the towels, I came back for the socks, seeing their reflection in the mirror. However, searching the landing, the physical location was harder to ascertain. Kneeling down didn't aid my search, to the point I even looked behind the mirror regardless of their reflection in plain view. After repeated blinks and a strong eye rub, my reflection knelt in their place, though there were no socks on his side. Conveniently, the pair sat on the beige carpet at my feet, which couldn't have been the case for that entire time. Being so close to the mirror again, the glass seemed to almost ripple, like a stone being dropped into a calm lake. It only lasted for a second, but a deep-rooted primal portion of my brain screamed out for me to step away. That was harder to rationalize, but again I pushed it out of my mind and just made a mental note to go to the opticians later. I remember questioning that feeling and was considering getting rid of the mirror in favor of the fairly expensive one Ebony had asked for initially. That was until I was making a phone call the day after, which solidified what I needed to do. Pacing the landing as you do whilst listening to the distorted jingle on hold from the opticians, I just exited the bathroom and was facing towards the mirror, not paying much attention to myself and its reflection. A voice on the other end of the phone began asking me questions as I answered accordingly. All the while I stared into that facsimile. For the first time, I wasn't curious or confused by its poor imitation. I was completely and utterly paralyzed where I stood. The image before me in that ancient wooden window wasn't hiding itself behind my form anymore. As I spoke, feeling my tongue and lips move in tandem, the entity I was certain was my reflection stood motionless, its mouth tightly closed, and eyes locked in on my own. Staring deeply into my own eyes, a short smile contorted on its copy of my face before it resumed its illusion, matching my movements perfectly. If it could reflect me exactly, why had it shown me it was an independent entity? Regardless, I knew there and then that something was wrong with the mirror and my reflection. It needed to go. Excusing myself from the call and darting down to the garage, I needed to find the tarp had brought it in. I knew Ebony would be back soon as we had a meal planned, and I was sure as hell not letting her get too close now. Racing up the staircase, tarp flowing behind me, its eyes followed my movements as I approached, tilting the mirror and draping the covering over the back. Avoiding any contact with the glass itself, I found myself standing face to face with my reflection again. It must have known what I was planning, and no longer seemed to care whether I knew it was an entity separate from myself or not. Its eyes, wider than before, limbs outstretched as it leant against the glass. Its uncanny frame undulated as the glass itself seemed to faintly vibrate. I don't know how long I stood there, staring into that fragile image of myself, gripping the corner of the tarp, ready to swing my right hand down and plunge the copy into darkness. A call rang out from downstairs as the front door swung open. Ebony's voice, and a sharp gust of cold air permeating the second floor as it smiled back at me. "Ben, are you ready? We need to set off now if we're going to get there on time." As my head swiveled to call down, responding to her question, the ice-cold feeling of an unnaturally smooth surface stung the wrist of my right hand, reverberating through my entire body. In a split second, the feeling of being dropped from an immeasurable height engulfed me as an unfathomably deep hole opened in my chest. Regaining consciousness after a near ephemeral expanse of time, I stared back into my own eyes. Paralleling my movements moments ago, my left hand now only gripped air where the tarp had been. My reflection stepped backwards as I did, bumping into the banister behind me, causing me to turn. Scanning the landing, the hall seemed to be flipped. Walking over and slowly swinging the door open, I was met with nothing. Where my bedroom should have been was a blank white expanse stretching for an infinitesimal distance in all directions. Stepping back whilst turning my head, I could see the elated expression on my reflection's face as it looked at its hands and touched its face, polarizing my slack-jawed visage. Spinning and rushing over to the staircase in a faux attempt to seek comfort in Ebony's voice, I opened my mouth to call out her name. If I had, I would have been calling out into another maddeningly hollow white scape, lingering 3 steps down from me. My heart beat a vigorous melody as my body seemed to vibrate, gripping the banister for any semblance of support under a crushing weight. Looking back to the mirror, my reflection was stationary, watching my hysterical reaction to the situation he had been all too familiar with. Something caught my eye as I stared back from this side. The runes adorning the frame of the mirror seemed much more legible. In an ancient flowing script were the words Refracta persona. Breaking us from our silent realization, the sound of footsteps echoed up the stairs as Ebony spoke. "Ben, come on, what are you doing?" My mouth opened, but the words that spilt were in my own. "I'm just not feeling it, babe. Sorry." "Don't worry. I'll get that one you were eyeing up and drop this off at the tip tomorrow." Smiling, she nodded, stepping back to the staircase as my copy pulled the corner of the tarp over the rest of the glass. His smile growing as the light faded, punctuated by my world fading beneath my feet. With no light and nothing to reflect, I was cold, alone and without form. I don't know how long I've been here or if I've always been in this place, with those false memories crafted to give me even a modicum of agency. A light pierced the endless night, as structure crystallized beneath my now reforming feet. From that triangular crack, a woman's face peered deeply into my window as I followed her lead. Moments later, as she stripped back the cover, I was face to face with a middle-aged woman as she marveled at what I assume were the mirror's adornments. My feet rested on a dusty stone floor as we shuffled through a series of boxes and old car parts. This would look perfect in our living room. Stan can't say no if I just get it, can he? A wave of relief overtook me as even in my fragile state, I knew what I had to do. With a bitter realization, the anger I had for my reflection in that crumbling memory dissipated. Just like him, if I wanted to break free of my restraints, I needed her to come closer. My friend and I do building renovations and we found a broken head. It is getting crazy at this point. I feel like we just cannot find a regular job. This one was the worst by far. Not the work itself, but what happened. We barely made it out of there, and I doubt anyone will believe our story. But I may as well come clean and let you know what happened to us at the Baxter building. We may have had a hand in its destruction, but what burned there was something far worse than a simple building. Something evil was hopefully destroyed there as well. I was behind the wheel of our old work van as Jake and I drove toward the Baxter building downtown. The van's worn seats and the lingering smell of fuel and dusty upholstery set the stage for our trip back to the renovation project. We had worked a few odd jobs together for a while since our crime scene cleanup days and that last job that led to our departure from that line of work. We were cruising down the highway and Jake turned down the blaring Metallica just long enough to comment on our past cleanup jobs and how he preferred our current jobs. Yeah man, this beats the hell out of the old gig. It is way better than clearing out blood and brain matter from all those cleanup jobs. Especially the last one, the one where we almost died. I would take the risk of asbestos exposure over being cut up by a psychopath any day, plus the pay is better. He grinned like a maniac and laughed. I couldn't disagree. The contractor we were working with now had been very reliable, and even though we stayed busy and the days were hard, at least cleaning up old buildings and doing renovation beat all the terrible things we saw in our old line of work. He always teased me about my overly serious recounting of the incident, but we did almost die. Amid the banter, our conversation moved between memories of bizarre mishaps and the practical realities of our new renovation gig. We put the past aside as we pulled up to the job site and parked the van. Jake got out and started grabbing some of the equipment we were supposed to bring with us. I went to help, but my eyes were immediately drawn to the Baxter building's crumbling facade, a grim reminder of a time long past. I thought it was a hotel or something before it closed years ago. I was not sure of the history. Now it was destined to become overpriced condos or something. I supposed I would find out if I was kept on long enough to see the project complete. The building stood with broken windows, peeling paint, and a structure that seems to almost breathe the weight of its history. I felt a clap on my back as Jake snapped me out of my reverie. Snap out of it, dude. We gotta go. Busy day, so no screwing around. Also, if I have to haul this stuff inside, then you have to help with the floors. I shrugged and accepted the terms of his deal, and we gotta move on. As we walked into the lot, we were greeted by familiar faces. Mark, who was busy inspecting the entrance while chatting with another colleague, Nina, whose quick smile contrasted with the ominous atmosphere, and Lyle, our foreman, who, though friendly, always looked on the verge of being pissed off for whatever reason. Jake would of course say, Lyle just has a bit of the old RBF, resting bitch face, though of course he would never say that to the boss's face. With a few handshakes, greetings, and some lighthearted jibes exchanged, we dove into the day's tasks, dividing up roles, discussing what pieces of the rundown structure to restore first, and plotting our next moves around scattered tools and reclaimed wood. Lyle directed everyone to the most pressing tasks at hand, and we got to work. The environment was great, and we had all worked together before on other jobs, but the sense of camaraderie was tinged with an undercurrent of apprehension. The place was a little spooky, and we were glad we were working early in the day. By mid-morning, the work is in full swing, and I could see tangible progress taking shape as we methodically peeled away layers of decay. I was working alongside Jake, measuring planks for new flooring and removing old hazardous materials with careful precision. Despite our steady pace, obstacles quickly appeared, a stubborn, rotting section of the floor that refused to come up easily and hidden wiring that forced us to improvise. As I took a moment to catch my breath, my thoughts drifted to the strange mix of satisfaction and worry. Satisfaction from knowing our hard work was reviving a forgotten building, yet worry about the eerie vibe that seemed woven into its very structure. We had a lot left to do, but it was coming together. I was anxious to get some new paint and lighting in the building to push back some of the oppressive gloom and creepy atmosphere. I realized I must still be a bit stressed out after what happened last year. Almost being murdered will make you a bit paranoid, and I wish I had the carefree attitude about it that Jake managed to maintain. I got back to the task at hand. After a few hours, Lyle instructed Jake, Mark, and myself to head to the basement and start down there. All three of us could not suppress groans of annoyance at being assigned the task. The area was one of the rougher spots in the building and no one wanted to go down there. Even in the daytime, it was dark and stank like a moldy tomb. Jake started to mutter something, but Lyle cut him off, reminding him, "If that is asking too much, you are welcome to go home. Just don't expect a paycheck in the mail if you cut and run now. I know it sucks, but just get over it." We grabbed our lights and went down to the basement. If there were windows in there, the grime choked them. Greasy shadows clung to the corners of the basement like a second skin, and our steps echoed loudly through the darkness. We'd stripped the Baxter building to its bones and exposed a frame barely held together by time and mold. I played the third wheel, while they pried at stubborn pieces. I carted the scraps into piles of kindling that stretched from one damp wall to the other. It felt like miles down there, the whole place wider and emptier than it had any right to be, and yet somehow suffocatingly close. We talked loud and often to fill the space. "Careful, Mark," I warned. "You fall through and Jake and I aren't catching you." "Just testing you guys." Mark shot back, his grin wide in the dimness. "Make sure you're paying attention." Jake grunted, his words few and far between as usual. "Miles is just worried hell have to do some real work." My laugh came quick. "You caught me." Our voices tangled in the air, blending with the scrape of crowbars and the crackle of wood. Every piece we took away revealed more decay, more dark patches spreading like disease. The whole building sat heavy with water and time. We both looked up when Mark shouted, "Whoa!" His boots thudded once, twice, then silence. He stood on a soft patch, doing a wild jig to stay upright, and then there was a splintering crash. His arms went wide and he disappeared, swallowed by the floor. It happened in a blink, but I felt it stretch and warp. A surreal moment, as though caught underwater. Jake's arm was extended, futile and late, while I just stood and stared. Then the noise of Mark's laughter came from beneath us, rising through the haze of floating debris. "Did you guys see that?" he hollered. "That was insane." We found our breath. "Hell, Mark," I yelled, trying to sound mad instead of scared. "Quit playing around." Jake was already on his knees, examining the edges of the hole. "Can you move?" His voice was steady, more curious than concerned. "Are you hurt?" I added, peering over Jake's shoulder into the jagged opening. A 10-foot drop at least. It was a miracle the guy wasn't dead. Mark's laugh bounced back again, the loudest sound in the room. "Just my pride," he said. "Guess it was bound to happen with the way this place is holding up." Jake straightened, brushing dust from his knees. "We need to be more careful," he said, but there was relief etched in his smile. The sight from above made the fall seem more harrowing. The edge of the break was a mess of splinters and dry rot. One side was mostly intact, the brittle wood giving way to an almost comical silhouette of where Mark's outline had been. We'd expected rot, but not this. The narrow escape was as unsettling as it was impressive. I tossed my crowbar down to Mark. "Looks like you're the advance team. See if there's any gold down there." He caught it with ease, even in the bad light. "Roger that," he said, already setting to work. I could barely see his shape moving in the shadows, but his voice kept coming, loud and bright and full of life. "You should get down here," he shouted. "There's some weird stuff." The surprise in his tone carried up to us, laced with a kind of giddy triumph. I shared a look with Jake. He seemed torn between irritation and admiration for Mark's recklessness, but when we heard the hammering below, he gave a nod. We left the skeleton floor behind, careful not to tread too close to any other soft spots. With a mix of reluctance and curiosity, we made our way to join Mark in his strange discovery. There was a new energy in our steps, cautious but alive. Mark was right. It was bound to happen, just not the way we'd planned. What we saw when we descended was a man-made cave, but that didn't make it feel any less like a tomb. Stale and damp, the air lay heavy around us as Jake and I made our way down, stepping past layers of debris that clung to our boots like dead leaves in the fall. Our lights flickered, casting odd shadows against the walls. This was a different kind of forgotten. The entire space looked ancient, and Mark stood in the center of it, like the world's worst tour guide. "Thought you'd never get here," he said, sounding like he was in a park instead of the abyss. He waved his arms, giving us the grand tour. "Check it out," he said, pointing to the walls. "Ever seen anything like this?" His energy was contagious, if only a little. We walked over to join him, moving like spelunkers through the remains of old broken boxes and crumbling concrete. The room was filled with the echoes of our movement, and Mark's unfazed enthusiasm. "Pretty wild," I said, the sarcasm failing to mask the creeping unease in my chest. Jake squatted by one of the walls, shining his light into a low niche. He didn't say anything, just reached in and pulled out a pile of scorched plastic. The smell was a harsh whisper, chemical and faint. "Looks like something burned here," he said as he started to grin. "Extra crispy." Each alcove was a mystery, some filled with the remains of melted, twisted objects, others with burned-out candles. It was hard to tell what had happened, but the room felt saturated with old, leftover rituals. The farther we went, the stranger the debris became, with blackened metal scraps and disfigured shapes littering the floor. "You think someone was living down here?" I asked, but it was a weak attempt at an explanation. The place was too alien, too deliberately unsettling. Jake shook his head. "Doubt it, unless they were eating barbecue plastic," he said with a half-hearted laugh. "But somebody spent time here." Mark was more methodical, scanning each section before moving on. "It's strange," he said, more to himself than to us. We followed him into the far corner. By the time we were halfway through, the scope of it all was beginning to wear on me. "What is this place?" I said, feeling small in the empty vastness. Jake didn't slow down. "Underground lair of some mad scientist," he guessed. "Maybe we'll find his secret stash." Mark stayed quiet, his eyes narrowed with focus as he picked through the endless clutter. Nothing in the labyrinth made sense. If anything, the further we went, the more questions piled up, heavier than the scraps we unearthed. We reached the far end. The space was more cluttered, the objects more deliberate. It was a shrine of junk, a museum of bizarre pieces left to rot in obscurity. The alcoves were packed, some filled with spidery symbols etched into the soot-stained walls, others crowded with melted fragments. The air was thicker there, and the cold seemed more intense. Then we saw it, half hidden in a small niche at the very back. Even in the shadows, there was no mistaking the shape. A lone doll. It sat in silence, perched above us like it was waiting for something. The head was cracked in a dozen places, and its glassy eyes stared with unsettling brightness. Unlike the other objects, it was perfectly intact. Despite its size, it seemed to dominate the entire space. Jake's breath came out in a slow, visible stream. He moved closer, cautiously, as though it might leap out and bite him. "Creepy. Hey guys, do you think we found Annabelle's cousin?" he said as he nervously laughed, his words not quite capturing the way it filled the room. Mark hesitated. His grin faltered as he joined us, his first steps unsure, but he recovered, trying to laugh it off. "Guess that's the prize," he said, though his voice was missing its usual bravado. None of us wanted to touch it. Even Mark kept his distance, the doll's uncanny presence enough to make him pause. It was worse than the decay and darkness. It was patient and aware, sitting in its own shadow like it had been there forever. We didn't need to say anything. We all felt it. The oppressive weight of it hung around us. Before I could say anything, Jake chimed in. "Hope I'm out. Screw the creepy-ass haunted doll in a hidden cave under an old building. Let's go tell the others and see what Lyle wants to do with this crap." I agreed with Jake, and so did Mark. We all tried to find a good way back up. Unfortunately, the boards that bent, revealing our way down in a semi-incline, broke almost immediately when we tried to use them to pull ourselves up. To our dismay, we were stuck down there. Jake and I started calling for help, but we did not know if our voices would carry far enough so the others could hear. I tried to lift him up on my shoulders, but we still couldn't manage it. As we were trying to get out, Mark called us back. "Hey guys, look at what I found." We moved back over to him, and he was holding something. The paper was fragile. It almost crumbled at Mark's touch, the edges turning to dust as he unfolded it with careful hands. He held it out so we could all look at it, and what we saw was very disturbing. Some of the words were faded, others were smeared with dirt, but the way they strung together left me cold. A call for the broken head, childish and ominous in the same unsettling breath. Jake stood at Mark's elbow, the doll a footnote in the face of the new discovery. I stayed back, half fascinated, half afraid, until Mark's voice carried the lopsided rhyme across the room and straight through my bones. "Check it out," he said, and there was something almost like wonder in his voice. I took a step closer, the hair on my arms prickling with an unnamed sense of alarm. The sub-basement was freezing, but the chill in my spine had nothing to do with the temperature. Mark read aloud, slow and steady as the words looped through the shadows. Broken head. Oh, broken head, why don't you play with me? Think of the fun that could be done, that you and I could see. Imagine chaos, broken eyes, and shadows we could claim. From the abyss, where nightmares dwell, your whispers speak our game. The broken head, it warps and twists. Its playmates, they ask why. The broken head still plays its games, intent to watch you die. And with your death, your final breath, the game is now complete. A broken head is yours instead to end the game so neat. None of us spoke at first. We listened as the paper crumbled a little more with every word, and Mark's voice carved into the silence. A new game now, it's time to start. The scent is in the air. It's time to run. It's time to hide. The broken head is there. The last word echoed off the walls, louder than any of us expected. It stayed in the air, then sank into the ground, leaving us in a void that felt impossibly empty. I swallowed hard, not sure what to say, not sure if I should say anything at all. The shadows around us seemed thicker than before, like they were crowding in to listen. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Some creepy-ass children's rhyme that people were into back in the day, Jake said at last. His voice was too loud, a forced bravado barely masking the crack at its edges. I tried to shrug, but the motion felt stiff and mechanical. Yeah, seems a bit much for the kids. Maybe some demented adults game? I guessed, but even I didn't believe it. I tried to match Jake's casual attitude despite the morbid poem we had just read. A bit over the top, does not help reading that with that dead-eyed doll staring at us in the room. Mark's expression was unreadable, his eyes scanning the room as though the poem were a map. There's more to this, he said, his words more certain than his tone. Mark shifted his weight, pretending not to be fazed. Someone had way too much time on their hands, he said, but he stayed close, like a stray dog unsure of the territory. We were all trying too hard, acting too casual. The weight of the place had changed, and we felt it in the way our breaths left visible ghosts in the air. I took a step back, the doll looming over us like a patient predator. It didn't seem like a footnote anymore. It was the headline, the whole story, everything. Guys, I said, my voice breaking through the nervous silence. Does that doll look different to you? The crack in Jake's bravado widened, like it's about to eat us. Yeah, I'm getting that. Mark didn't respond. He was watching it carefully, too carefully, and in that moment, I knew he saw it too. It was subtle, a trick of the light maybe, but the longer we stood there, the more I felt it was watching us with the same keen awareness. We should have left. We should have listened to every instinct that screamed for the exit, but we stood frozen, the air around us heavier by the second. The doll was still in the corner, but the way it filled the room was almost impossible to believe. Then I saw it, just a twitch, the smallest shift, but enough to freeze the blood in my veins. The corner of its mouth, a movement as delicate and unsettling as a whisper in the dark, then a cracking sound and a sliver of its head broke open, revealing what looked like a sickly light underneath. Mark noticed too. His face went pale, the color draining like spilled milk. It's awake, he said, and it wasn't a question. Jake's confidence shattered, fear spreading across his features like cracks on a mirror. Are you messing with me? He said, but he was already backing away, each step louder and more frantic. We fled, each motion pulling us farther from the ominous thing we'd uncovered. Our breaths were ragged, fogging the air as we stumbled over debris. The room felt endless and tight, a cold grip around our throats, but nothing was more oppressive than the doll's steady gaze. It did nothing, of course, did not move to follow us, just watched us through its broken face with the odd lambent light mocking us underneath its eerie visage. We left it behind in the dark, its shadow lingering long after Wed burst into the uncertain light above. The three of us managed to get one of us up out of the terrible sub-basement and pull the others out. Then we rushed out and didn't stop until we hit the stairs. Mark and Jake were right behind me. None of us dared to look back. Not yet, but I knew it wasn't over. Not even close. The feeling crawled inside me like an unwelcome guest, and I knew it would be there, patient and present, when we returned to finish the job. For now we had to tell Lyle and the others about what we found. Our foreman stomped across the cracked concrete floor, his face a collage of impatience and dust, when we clambered up to him from the basement's dim depths. I recognized the furrowed brow and crossed arms from a dozen job sites before this one. Lyle wasn't used to being kept waiting. Mark climbed ahead of me and tossed the balled-up poem at him like it was a baseball. Lyle didn't even flinch as it bounced off his chest. I half expected him to pitch it back and tell us to go screw around on our own time, but instead he just squinted at us, shaking his head. "Looks like you've seen a ghost," he said, gruff and skeptical. Jake leaned against the exposed brick wall, breathing heavy from the climb. "You're not far off, boss." He rubbed his hands over his shaved head and let out a laugh that was mostly for show. "You ain't gonna believe this." I caught my breath, slinging an arm around Jake's shoulder, ready to back him up. But it was Mark who spoke next. Voice calm, measured, and subtly more serious than normal for him. "We found something down there." Lyle snorted. "Don't tell me you're digging for treasure. I pay you clowns to renovate, not play pirates." He picked up the paper from where it had landed at his feet and unfurled it, brow furrowing even deeper as he read. "What's this supposed to be, a joke?" "It's real," I said, more serious now. "We hit a spot where the floor gave out. Next thing we know, we're in some kind of stone cellar." "Could have been killed," Jake added, shaking his head with mock gravity. "Thought we were gonna be headlines. Workers crushed in tragic basement accident." Lyle shot him a look that said he wasn't in the mood for jokes. "You're telling me the floor just collapsed? I walked that whole area myself this morning." "It collapsed. All right," I said, raising my hands in surrender. "Not trying to accuse you of shoddy inspections, Lyle, but it dropped us like a bad habit." Jake nodded. "We've never seen anything like it. That room down there, it's not on any of the blueprints." Lyle rubbed his beard, considering this. His face softened, just a notch. "And this?" he asked, holding up the poem. Mark's voice dropped like he was about to tell a campfire story. "We weren't alone down there. Found something, someone waiting for us." "A doll," Jake clarified, his expression grim. Lyle's eyebrows shot up in a mixture of disbelief and amusement. "You're screwing with me. Tell me you're screwing with me." "Wish we were," I said. "The thing's got a busted head and eyes that look right through you. You'd have to see it to believe it." I glanced at Jake, wondering if maybe he had bought the prop as a prank, but his face was all business, as usual. Lyle tossed the poem back, shaking his head. "You don't have better things to do than come up with this shit." He looked at each of us in turn, searching for a crack in our story. "Give us some credit," Jake said. "We know our limits. We only lie when it comes to most sick days and reasons we can't come into work." Mark leaned in, making it clear he wasn't joking at all. "This is serious, Lyle. There's something wrong in this place. You know as well as we do, floors don't just drop out for no reason." Lyle stood there, frowning like he was calculating some impossible equation. Finally, he grunted and gestured toward the basement. "All right, show me. But if this is some kind of stunt, you're all out on your asses, you hear." I tucked the poem back in my pocket. Wouldn't expect any less. We grabbed the tools and gear we'd left scattered across the floor earlier. Jake rolled his eyes like he was being forced into child labor. "Didn't sign up for extra credit," he said. "Put in the work now and you can sleep in tomorrow," I shot back. He shrugged. "Not a morning person. Figure he'll just sleep in anyhow." "You call what you do work," Lyle said, still gruff but a bit more relaxed. The exchange of banter eased some of the tension as we got moving again. "So how old you think this place really is?" I asked, partly to mess with Lyle but also curious. "Got your curiosity going, huh?" Lyle shot back. "Older than me at any rate." "Older than dirt," Jake chimed in, making me laugh. We reached the basement, and Lyle looked around, frowning at the chaotic sprawl of tools and debris we'd left behind. "Everything looks in order to me," he said. "Take another look," I replied, pointing to the jagged hole gaping in the floor. Lyle squinted at it. "Well be damned," he muttered. Jake slapped him on the back, unable to resist one last dig. "Stick with us, Lyle. Lots more surprises where that came from." Lyle hovered like an expectant father while we set up the ladder, his brows pulled together in a skeptical knot. "Sure you're up for this?" I said, smirking as I wrenched the last piece of equipment into place. He grunted, dismissive. "Just hope it's not the bottom of my boot I find when I get down there." Jake slapped me on the back, already more upbeat than he should be after our last trip down. "Better let the boss go first," he joked. "Get all the ghosts shaking in their boots." "Old or new?" Lyle said. "It's still a pile of bricks and rotting wood. Don't start wetting your pants on me." Mark steadied the ladder, but his face looked pained, like he had a headache or something. "You all right, Mark?" "What? Oh yeah, I'm fine. Just got a bit of a headache. These fumes are not doing great for it either." He tried to smile and brush it off, but it seemed to be really bothering him. We started down, the air damp and heavy with that neglected building smell. Every footstep echoed in my chest, and I felt the rawness of the concrete through my boots as if the whole place was trying to crawl into my skin. Lyle's threats were light years away in my mind as we dropped back into the blackness. "It's even creepier than last time," I said, taking the last step off the ladder. "Everything's creepier when you know what's coming," Jake said, but he didn't sound too convinced himself. The climb seemed endless, our breaths shallow and quick as we made our way down. The light from the open floor above barely reached us, casting long shadows that moved with us like impatient companions. When Lyle finally touched ground, he scanned the sub-basement, his expression hard to read. "Not seeing much here," he said. "It was right over here," I replied, pointing to the spot where we'd left the doll. I half expected it to be sitting there, still as death and twice as ugly. Instead, nothing but an empty patch of concrete. Even the dust looked disturbed, like the thing had dragged itself off into a corner. Lyle squinted into the gloom, his disbelief palpable. "Seems to me you're making a lot of noise over a whole lot of nothing." The air felt thicker, somehow like we were breathing the weight of Lyle's skepticism. I watched him try to make sense of the space, his hands on his hips, eyes scanning the walls for some clue or proof, or maybe even the joke he was so sure we were playing. "We're not wasting your time, Lyle," I said. "It was here, we all saw it." Jakes looked uncharacteristically concerned and muttered, "It's like it got up and walked away." Lyle crossed his arms, the hard line of his mouth carving deeper into his face. "It don't make sense," Mark said. "We wouldn't have dragged you down here just to mess with you." "Wouldn't you?" Lyle shot back, his voice loud enough to echo. I felt the same unease creeping over me that I did the first time we found the damn thing. The room seemed bigger without the doll, the emptiness stretching out in every direction. "You don't pay us to come up with stories," I said. "It was real." "Was," Lyle said. "Looks like it still is, just in your heads." He turned his back and walked a few paces, letting the accusation hang there like old cobwebs. "Could be something supernatural," I ventured. "Creepier things have happened in creepy places." Lyle's jaw worked side to side like he was trying to chew through this latest load of bull. "Do I look like an idiot to you? You brought me down here for a show and forgot the main attraction." Jake shuffled around like he was trying to find a new angle, looking behind beams and around columns. "Was here, damn thing was here." He bent to peer into a space between some rusting ductwork. I watched him reach in, like he expected the doll to pop out at him. "Aha," he said, voice full of triumph before turning to disappointment. Nothing. The emptiness of the room pressed down on us, the bare concrete more menacing than any doll could have been. I watched Lyle, saw his patience drain as we searched and came up empty again and again. "We're not lying," I said. "Something's going on here, even if we don't understand it." Lyle marched back to the ladder, frustration lining every step. "I've had enough of this wild goose chase," he said, climbing faster than I'd ever seen him move. "I want you all back to real work by noon." We stood there, three fools in a hole, as his voice trailed up the concrete walls and faded into silence. As Lyle went back up the ladder, we all lingered in the sub-basement looking around as if expecting the things we saw to show up as soon as he had left. Suddenly, Mark clutched his head with both hands and groaned in pain. "Man, my brain's gonna explode," he said, sinking to his knees. The bravado was gone from his voice, leaving something raw and pained in its place. "What's wrong?" I asked, rushing over to him. Jake joined me, crouching low. "Is it the dust?" he said, as though Mark were having an allergic reaction and not about to keel over. "It's something in my head," Mark said, wincing as he fought to get the words out. "Messing with me. Break it wants to break. It says I am it." Lyle was on the ladder, almost back to the top. He must have heard Mark, because he called back down to us. "What's he on about now?" he said, his voice sharper than it needed to be. Mark's face was a mask of sweat and pain, and the vein in his forehead stood out like it was about to burst. "Feels like it's cracking open," he said. His voice broke, and I could hear real fear in it now. "We need to get him out of here," I said, looking from Jake to Lyle and back again. Lyle came back down and was next to us, breathing heavily from the short run across the room. "Let's go," he said, urgency creeping in. They grabbed Mark under the arms, trying to lift him, but he slipped through their hands and hit the floor hard. His whole body tensed and he shook like he was being electrocuted. "Seizure," I yelled. "He's having a seizure." "Hold him steady," Jake said. "Don't let him hurt himself." He was all business, even now, but I could hear the tremor in his voice. Mark convulsed in their grip, his muscles rigid as steel, I dropped down and cradled his head in my hands, feeling the slickness of his sweat, the awful heat radiating off him. Lyle tried to help, his gruffness replaced by frantic energy. "Don't just sit there," he barked, more out of desperation than anger. "We need to move him." I felt my stomach twist as I watched Mark thrash and jerk. It was like he was being puppeteered by something inside him, something we couldn't see. Then, as quickly as it started, it stopped. Mark went limp, his head lolling to the side, eyes half open and vacant. Jake looked at me, a question in his eyes. I had no answers for him, only the hollow pit of dread that had settled in my gut. "Is he—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "We need to try," Jake said. "Get him to a hospital. Now." Lyle pulled at Mark's arms again. This time there was no resistance. The absence of struggle was worse than the convulsions. We hauled him to the ladder, his feet dragging on the ground, his head bobbing as though detached. Every second was an eternity, the silence louder than any of Mark's screams had been. And then he twitched. Once. Twice. "He's coming too," I said. Relief and fear tangled in my throat. Mark's body jerked upright, rigid again, but different this time. His face contorted, then stilled. His mouth stretched wide, soundless and empty. Something split. A crack ran through the side of his head, opening like a wound, and a sickly light poured out. We stumbled back, the three of us, falling over ourselves to get away. "Jesus," Lyle said, his voice strangled. Mark stayed there, perched like a broken marionette, that awful light leaking from him in unnatural bursts. "What the actual hell?" Jake screamed. We stood frozen, helpless and horrified, as Mark's body spasmed again. He looked dead, and yet he moved in ways that no living thing should move. Then he was still, and for a heartbeat I thought it was over. Until he turned toward us. His limbs jerked into action, mechanical and precise. His head flopped to one side, the light still spilling out like the eye of a monster. The splitting, tearing sound was awful as he twitched spasmodically, and the worst part was the breaking and shifting of his skull, and pieces came apart and rearranged themselves. He took a step, then another. "Mark," I said, a pitiful plea. I barely recognized my own voice. He didn't answer, didn't even look like he heard me. Lyle and Jake stood dumbfounded, rooted to the spot. I grabbed Jake's arm, pulling him back. "We gotta go," I said. Mark kept coming, relentless, each step more sure than the last. Lyle snapped out of it, grabbing a piece of metal pipe, holding it like a weapon. "It won't stop," Jake said, backing away. I watched as Mark reached us, saw Lyle swing the pipe. It connected with a sickening crack that split Mark's head open even further. He did not fall down, his bones contorted and reshuffled after the impact, even with the force sounding loud enough to have shattered his spine. The thing that was once Mark forced its destroyed face to look at us again, and it gurgled an almost imperceptible word through its ruined face. "Run." We heeded the advice and ran, the shock wearing off enough to get us moving. "It's still him," I said. "It's still him, and it's not." Mark followed, that terrible light blazing out of his shattered and broken head. We reached the ladder, and I almost thought we'd make it. But a wall of debris had formed in front of us, blocking the exit, an impossible mass of twisted metal, plastic, and what appeared to be doll heads. And worse, what looked like fragments of real skulls, cracked and hollow like the doll heads we'd found. We were trapped with a thing that wore Mark's skin. "Keep moving," Lyle yelled, his voice cracking. But it was useless, and we knew it. Mark's voice rattled the air with a brittle edge, sharp and jagged like the wind through broken glass. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, shrill and echoing in the tight confines of the sub-basement. The words were unintelligible but held a terrible urgency. The more we tried to listen, the more it filled our heads, pressing in until we thought our own skulls might split. Jake pulled me toward the darkened corridors at the far side of the room. We sprinted into the unknown, stumbling and gasping, the sound of Mark's pursuit always close behind. His footsteps were deliberate and steady, gaining on us with a patience that only increased our panic. "This way," Lyle yelled, as much a command as it was a plea. He led us through the maze of old pipes and low-hanging beams, his long strides keeping pace just ahead of Jake and me. The path wound back toward the stairs, an open expanse that would leave us exposed. We hesitated, and that split second cost us. Mark rounded the corner, sudden and implacable. The sickly light from his head cut through the dimness, throwing a grotesque shadow of himself across the walls. Lyle shoved Jake and me toward a side room. "Go," he said. The words ripped from his throat with desperate urgency. We staggered through the narrow doorframe, spinning to see Mark bear down on him. "Lyle, watch out," Jake cried, his voice raw and filled with the helplessness I felt gnawing at me. But Lyle didn't flinch. He raised the metal pipe in one last defiant swing. Mark took the hit with a grotesque jerk of his shoulders, but it didn't stop him. He reached Lyle in 3 long strides, arms moving with that same puppet-like speed, grasping, pulling. And then Lyle screamed, a sound so full of agony and defiance that it froze me in place. Mark had him by the neck, forcing him to his knees. The crack came next, sharp and dreadful, the same sound that had come from Mark only minutes before. I watched in horror as Lyle's head split open, the light exploding outward like a grotesque birth. It radiated through the space, blinding us with its unnatural brilliance. That creature that had once been Mark gurgled something out loud that sounded like, "You are it." The scream ended abruptly. Lyle went limp, collapsing to the ground, the glow from his head casting an eerie halo around his body. "Run," Jake said, the single word a shattered whisper in the oppressive silence. I didn't need to be told twice. We bolted, leaving behind the grotesque tableau of Lyle and Mark, our feet pounding a frantic rhythm against the floor. But we hadn't gone far before we heard them again. 2 voices now, not words but an awful chorus of sound, pursuing us with renewed vigor. "They're faster," I gasped, disbelief and terror fueling my flight. Jake kept a step ahead, urgency pulling him forward. "Keep moving," he said, more command than encouragement. Our path took us through the winding guts of the building. We could barely believe the sub-basement was so large. "You think we're next?" Lyle probably did not need another excuse to kill us even before this, Jake said, grimacing at how hollow the attempt at humor sounded. "No, I think they just want to talk to us about their favorite era of dolls." "Of course we are," I said, the words cutting through my gasp for air. The lights above us flickered and dimmed as we passed, giving the unsettling impression that the building was drawing power from us, feeding on our terror. "This isn't happening," I said. "This is insane." But every echo of their relentless pursuit told me otherwise. Then, a miracle. We found a derelict elevator shaft that loomed up ahead, a steel cage of promise and escape. We had no idea where it might take us. This was probably not even the main elevator, but it was our only way up that was not back towards the things we left behind. "This way," Jake said, veering toward it. I followed, the light and sound swelling behind us. Mark and Lyle, closing in. The wall gave way to a narrow hall, the elevator just visible at the end. We threw ourselves at it, hands and feet colliding in chaos and hope. The doors parted, and we fell inside, collapsing against the metal as the old cables creaked and groaned under our weight. The doors slid shut, separating us from the terrible light. We lay on the floor, gasping for air, as the elevator rattled upward. I could feel every shake and shudder as it climbed, each one threatening to send us plummeting back into the nightmare below. "What if it stops?" I said, the panic barely contained. "Then we find another way," Jake said, breathless but determined, same as always. Floor by floor we rose. The first was a mess of tarps and scaffolding, the signs of our work half finished and forsaken. The second was stripped to the studs, bare walls and exposed wires, everything a dull gray that blurred as we sped past. The third was crumbling, layers of decay peeling back to reveal the years and ghosts beneath. The elevator shook, rattled, but didn't stop. And then, finally, we found an exit, likely on the 4th floor. We piled out into a room that did not seem to have any windows or doors. It seemed like a dead end, but at least those things couldn't follow us. We had a general idea based on where we thought we were, and we started looking at a section of wall that might be weak enough to make an opening. We did not have much time to consider the situation before we heard the terrible shrieking below us in the elevator shaft and knew we would not be safe there after all. We both started kicking and battering the same section that should have exited into the 4th floor hallway. We heard something clawing at the doors to the elevator and knew we had to hurry. With a crash, we managed to breach the thin layer of wall that had concealed this room, and we spilled out into the hall, just as the elevator doors were wrenched open and we saw what was left of Lyle reaching for us through the bending metal of the elevator doors. As we started to run, we had to stop and run down a separate hall when to our horror we encountered another broken head. This one looked like it had been Nina. Her face was split open and her jerky motions almost caused her to tip over as she stumbled after us, but she quickly began pursing us with the same malevolent speed the others had. My lungs already felt like they were tearing, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't even slow down. Jake and I barreled through the building's hallways, tripping over tools and abandoned pieces of equipment. We skidded around a corner, and I risked a look back. They were still there, the broken-headed things that used to be our coworkers. Their limbs moved in fits and starts, twitching like something being electrocuted. We turned another corner, and the lights buzzed and flickered above us. In those blinks of light, I could see more of them, coming out of rooms, shambling toward us. Their heads were horrible to look upon. Cracks split their faces, and beneath those cracks something dark leaked through, like whatever was inside them was trying to claw its way out. I stumbled, almost falling, but Jake grabbed my arm and yanked me forward. We didn't say anything, didn't need to. My mind was a blur, thoughts crashing into each other like a wreck on the freeway. My heart pounded so loud I could feel it in my throat, and I forced myself to keep running. They kept coming. The building was alive with them, as if it had spawned these things from the rotted wood and broken plaster. I could see more of them now, crowding the hallway, all of our old crew with their heads shattered and grins split by ragged lines. It made me dizzy, trying to count them, trying to understand how so many could change so fast. Just minutes ago, we'd all been working, joking about the weirdness in the basement. Now, they were things, hollowed out and filled with whatever the hell this was. Their footsteps echoed, a chorus of uneven beats that surrounded us from all sides. I imagined their stares on my back, those awful eyes and their crumbling heads following every move. Every breath burned, and it felt like the air was thickening, like we were running through wet concrete. We crashed into the next corridor, and we saw the main door. We raced towards it, but a wall of grinning broken heads covered the exit. I tried to focus. Had to. We could find a way out. There had to be a way out. But the more we ran, the less sense the building made. Whatever hellish entity had been unleashed had transformed it all somehow. It felt like a nightmare, the kind where everything familiar turns just strange enough to scare the hell out of you. Where were the stairs? How could they be this far? We ducked into another hallway, this one narrower, and I almost slammed into Jake's back when he stopped. There they were again, more of them. A wall of bodies and twisted limbs, all moving with that horrible stop-motion jerk, like they were learning how to walk again. I didn't want to look at their faces, didn't want to see what I thought I recognized beneath the cracks and madness. We kept hearing the stuttering and horrible voices, mumbling, then saying, then shouting. "You are it now. Play with us." No way out, no way past. I could feel myself starting to slip, like ice was spreading in my head. They were everywhere. They were going to catch us. This way. Jake's voice cut through the noise, pulling me back, and he was moving again, taking a sharp turn toward the west wing. I followed, legs shaking but still working. If we couldn't get past them, maybe we could go under. I understood what Jake was thinking before he'd even finished the thought. We had to get back to the basement, the natural gas line, the propane tanks he had stored there for temporary use. It was the only plan we had left. We raced toward it, through a warren of rooms that grew tighter and darker, and I knew this was our last shot. This whole place had to go. Whatever hell we unleashed here, it had to burn. It felt like the whole building was shaking, the walls and floors vibrating with some angry, diseased energy. We slammed the basement door and locked it, but the sound of them outside, the broken heads, only seemed to grow louder. I heard taps and scrapes, the horrible music of their movements, and my own heart pounding out of my chest. The stairs were slick with something wet, and I stumbled down them, nearly pitching headfirst into the dark. Jake caught me, his grip like iron, and together we half ran, half fell to the bottom. The basement was worse than I remembered. Shadows crept and crawled, and every step echoed like a gunshot. The place was a mess of debris and old equipment, stacked high in a labyrinth of clutter. We had to navigate through it, tripping over cables and rusted pipes, making our way to the far corner where the tanks and gas lines waited. My breath sounded ragged and wrong in the stillness. I didn't want to think about what would happen if they found a way in. If we didn't have time to finish this. "Here," Jake said. Voice calm, like the world wasn't ending around us. It helped, more than I wanted to admit. We stopped by the main gas line, and I could see the propane tanks stored near it. It was funny just then, thinking that when Lyle ordered us to store them here, I thought it was a safety hazard and could risk a fire or explosion. Now I was grateful that it would do just that. We didn't talk. We knew what needed to be done, and it needed to be done quickly. I pulled wires out of my pocket, hands moving like they were someone else's, shaking and awkward. Everything felt like a dream, a nightmare. My mind kept jumping back to the way they looked, the way our crew had turned into those things. I tried to shut it out, tried to focus on setting everything up correctly, connecting the lines, setting it just right. The air was damp and foul, a stink of rot that clawed at my throat. I glanced at Jake. He was working steadily, his face a mask of concentration. It steadied me too, even as the fear gnawed at the edges of my thoughts. I knew this was our only shot. Blow it up, burn it all down. It had to work. A loud bang made me jump, and I almost dropped everything. The door. They were at the door, pounding, scraping, trying to get in. I fought to keep my hands steady. It wasn't going to hold. I knew it wasn't going to hold. "Keep going," Jake said, and there was a fierce, urgent edge to his voice. I forced myself to move, forced myself to think. Another bang. Louder. A crack split the air, the sound of wood starting to give. We were so close. Almost there. I wrenched the valve open, praying it would work, praying we wouldn't be here to see it if it did. The smell of gas filled the air, sharp and bitter, mixing with the smell of fear and sweat. "Now," Jake yelled, and I knew he was right. Now or never. I twisted the last piece into place, felt the cold metal bite into my skin. I thought my heart would explode, thought we'd never make it. I didn't let myself look back. We finished setting the firebomb, the tanks lined up like dominoes, ready to blow. A mad, desperate hope flared up, almost as terrifying as the fear. This had to work. It had to. Jake's eyes met mine. I nodded, more to convince myself than him. We were ready, ready to get out of here, ready to run, and ready to make damn sure this place didn't survive us. We had one last desperate plan to escape. We armed the bomb and knew that once the fire started, the whole place would be engulfed in minutes. If we could escape through the back maintenance panel, we might be able to get out, assuming the malign growths did not block that way as well. As we started to move, we saw him. He was standing between us and the stairs, like he'd been waiting. His head was cracked like the others, jagged lines spider-webbing across his skull, but worse, so much worse. My mind didn't want to understand, but I knew it was him. The huge frame, the way he stood, almost like he was about to laugh. "Mark," he lurched forward, and I thought I saw him falter, thought I saw a moment of doubt, as if some part of him knew what he was doing. We charged, desperate to get past, and the force controlling him seemed to take over. The sound of tearing filled the air. He looked at me, and I swear I saw something human, some trace of Mark, beneath the madness. It was gone in an instant. His head tilted, and the cracks seemed to yawn open, wide and hungry. A dark smear oozed across his face, like the shadow of a grin. It was more than I could stand, more than anyone should have to. Jake and I rushed him, praying for a miracle. Mark moved with terrifying speed, faster than the others. His massive arms swung wide, and I barely ducked in time. The wind from it knocked me sideways, into a heap of metal and debris. The pain flared sharp and hot, but there was no time to think about it. Jake was already on his feet, grabbing my arm, pulling me up. "Go," I yelled, but it sounded more like a gasp. My own voice, scared and small, almost lost in the chaos. Mark paused, just for a second, like he was fighting something, like he was fighting himself. His movements jerked, a grotesque dance as the force tried to take control. I didn't know if I should feel anger or horror, or guilt. I didn't know what to feel, so I didn't, not then. There was no time. He charged again, and I saw Jake dodge left, saw him grab a sledgehammer from the demolition tools and swing. It connected with a sickening thud, and Mark's head snapped to the side, but it didn't stop him. He staggered, then turned toward us, eyes blank and endless in their cracked flesh mask. I thought we were finished. I thought this was the end. But something shifted. I saw it in the way he moved, the way he hesitated. Something in him was breaking free, and for a moment I could almost hear his voice beneath the groans. A low, agonized sound, like he was pleading for it to stop, to be over. That moment passed, and he lunged. I couldn't see how we'd make it, how we'd ever get past. My mind spun with the impossibility, the way everything had gone from bad to worse, worse. Jake shoved me to the side, and Mark's swing missed by inches. It left him open, left us just enough room to push through. I grabbed the length of chain, didn't think, didn't hesitate, just wrapped it around his legs and pulled with everything I had. It slowed him down, more than I'd hoped, more than I dared. We ran, limbs and lungs on fire, scrambling up the stairs. I heard him behind us, the sound of his struggles, and the terrible echo of his steps. We were out out of the basement, and into the hallway, the nightmare following at our heels. The walls loomed and flickered, alive and angry, but it didn't matter, we were ahead. We'd made it. Somehow, impossibly, we'd made it. I could feel the blood dripping down my arm, hot and sticky, but there was no time to care. No time for anything but getting the hell out. The hallway stretched in front of us, impossibly long, impossibly dark, and I knew they were right behind. I could hear them. The sound of broken porcelain, the sound of nightmares. We moved like we were in a dream, the kind where your legs don't work, the kind where you never get away. We couldn't stop, couldn't let them catch us. Not now, not when we were this close. We heard the rest of them, clambering after us in the dark. I gasped for air, but it felt like breathing through a straw. My lungs screamed and my muscles burned, but none of it mattered. We turned a corner, another. The building a maze that twisted back on itself. Jake was a step ahead, moving like a man possessed, the determination carved into his features. The lights flickered overhead, a strobe that lit the horrors around us. The walls seemed to lean in, suffocating, smothering, but we kept going. Plastic sheeting stretched across a window, a thin barrier between us and the outside. My heart leapt and stumbled, a mad dance in my chest. It was right there. It was hope and escape, and it was real. If we could just make it, just hold on a little longer. The building groaned and the temperature spiked, heat rolling off the walls in waves. We knew the fire had started. If we did not make it out, at least those things would burn. I could hear them, those things, those creatures, getting closer. I could almost feel their fingers on the back of my neck, almost see their shattered heads in my mind, cracks spreading, grins widening. I thought of Mark, thought of all of them, and I pushed myself harder. We were too close to fail, too close to let it end like this. We reached the maintenance door. It was blocked, but we had to try something. We saw the disturbing blanket of plastic heads was thinner near an adjacent window. I didn't hesitate. The torch I had recovered flared in my hand, and I set it against the plastic, watched it bubble and curl and peel away. I could hear Jake behind me, the scuffle and thud of debris as he threw it aside, his breath as ragged as mine. The smoke stung my eyes and the whole world narrowed to a single point. Get through, get out, get away. They were almost on us. I could hear the thump of their steps, the discord of their limbs. It made my skin crawl, the way they moved, the way they never stopped, never slowed. Jake grabbed the torch, held it like a weapon, and I smashed through the last of the barrier. It cut my arms, my face, but the pain barely registered. We burst through the window and onto the deck, the world exploding into color and noise. It shook beneath our weight, and I thought it would give, thought would tumble back down into that hell, but it held. We scrambled down, the sound of the firebomb roaring to life inside, the whole building coming apart behind us. The blast hit like a shockwave, heat and noise and the scream of something alive. A wall of fire shot into the sky, and I turned transfixed by the sight of it. The building seemed to melt, to fold in on itself as the flames devoured it, the air filled with the terrible music of burning, of cracking wood and twisting steel, and something else. A chorus of other sounds, the wails of things that should never have existed. We hit the ground and my legs almost gave out. We were away, but the heat licked at our backs, chased us as we ran for the van. Jake wrenched the door open and we threw ourselves inside, slammed it shut. It was only then, only when I heard the metallic click of the lock, that I let myself believe it. Let myself know we were out, alive. We sat there, gasping for breath, watching the building die in a blaze of fury and noise. The sky above it glowed a sickly orange like a wound that wouldn't close. I couldn't stop shaking, couldn't stop seeing the cracked heads and dark eyes. I didn't think I ever would. Think we might need another new job, Jake said. Voice raw and ragged, but steady. I laughed, or tried to, but it came out like a sob. Yeah, I am not sure how we are going to explain this one to the authorities, but this is getting old. We didn't look back as we drove away. I could feel it behind us, feel the heat and madness of it. I wondered if I'd ever outrun what I'd seen in Mark's eyes, what I'd heard in the way the building screamed as it burned. We drove, leaving the nightmare and a piece of ourselves in the flames. Maybe it was all we'd ever have, Jake and I. Maybe it was enough. Jake and I are doing okay now and have mostly recovered. Once again, we are both going to look into a different line of work after this. Renovations seemed safe, but after what we saw, we lost the will to do more. What do you think? Anywhere else that is hiring? When I was 8, I was friends with the fairies in my yard, but then they started to go missing. I was looking for my Grammy's ring when I found him. Grammy had given me her ring before she died, and losing it felt like losing her. Mom forgot to pay the electricity bill again, and I only felt safe with the ring. I will say as a child our house was always dark. I did get used to it eventually. Mom couldn't afford electricity, so we usually sat in candlelight. But when Mom was passed out after drinking too much, my brother and I were stuck. Grammy's ring was the only thing that made me feel safe. I knew I was wearing it in the yard while playing in the flowers after school, and the thought of a night without it twisted my gut. But after she died, we didn't have anyone, just Mom in a pitch-dark house. Before she passed, my grandma was our unofficial guardian. After school, we would walk all the way to her house, and she would make us dinner and let us watch TV. The sky was darkening when I rushed outside, kneeling in Mom's flower garden. Ross, my brother, sometimes locked me out if I stayed out too long. His fear stemmed from our father coming home from work when we were younger and destroying the kitchen if his dinner wasn't made. Not much to say about Dad. He left us a year later. Yes, he took all Mom's savings, but the house was quiet. Sometimes I intentionally sat in the yard at night. Our neighbors usually watched TV at 8 p.m. and I could see the reflection in the front window. I once watched a whole episode of a TV show. I had no idea what it was, but I think it was about space. On that particular night, it was too cold to sit outside. I was wearing Mom's coat over my pajamas, grasping my flashlight. Ross' face was in the window, lit up by Mom's phone, also our only light. I gestured for him to leave the door open and he just pressed his face against the glass, making kissy faces. When we did have electricity, rarely, my brother would force me to microwave him frozen meals because he was the male of the house, now that Dad was gone. Ever since Dad left, my brother insisted on being the male of the house, repeating what Dad would always say. I wasn't expecting him to leave the door unlocked, which meant another night of crawling up the drain pipe and through my bedroom window. I focused on Grammy's ring. Kneeling in the flowers, I grasped at anything. Rocks, pebbles, crumbling flower buds, old beer cans. A voice startled me, and I almost toppled over. The squeak came from a wilted rose, and I briefly wondered if I was seeing things. Bobby, one of my friends in elementary school, once bragged that his father ate mushrooms and thought he was a bird. I became fascinated with the idea, and Bobby and I spent a whole slumber party Googling mushrooms. It's over here. I vaguely remembered my mother planting some when we were younger, but they were the edible kind, the ones she used in her winter soup. So, if I wasn't seeing things, if I wasn't high on mushroom spores, then what exactly did I hear? Hello? I'm sorry. Are you blind? I'm down here. I shined my flashlight on it, peering closer, and there, when I crawled directly into a crushed rosebush, was a glowing ball of light. All I could see was my mother's flower bed. I found myself mesmerized by it, hypnotized by light that I wasn't used to. Closer now, the ball of light morphed into a tiny human perched on a leaf, legs swinging. The boy looked like a high schooler, glass wings poking from his back, a scowl on his face. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Whipping my head around, I searched for my brother. His shadow was gone. Mom used to warn Ross and me about the fairies when we were little. She said it was the fairies who stole our toys, made us sneeze, and the fairies who chased away our father. Ross didn't believe in them, but I was always intrigued. I asked my friends at school if they had fairies at the bottom of their yards, and they thought I was weird. I remember Mom telling us, if you do a fairy a favor, they will return it by granting you a wish. I wondered if she'd gotten that from a book. But she also warned, if you hurt a fairy, you will pay for it, and your children will pay for it, and your children's children's children will suffer. They will hunt to the end of your bloodline, and even then, their mere presence will drive adults insane. Maybe they were protecting her after all. Before she started drinking, Mom used to tell us stories about the fairies in our yard and how, when she was a little girl, she helped a captive fairy prince, freeing him from her neighbor's bell jar. The one in front of me was scowling before his expression softened. The one in front of me was dressed in scraps of human clothing, an old checkered shirt wrapped around his torso, strips of denim for pants, and a satchel slung across his chest. "Hi," the fairy whispered, tilting his head. He looked maybe 17 or 18. I had no idea how that translated to fairy years. Contrary to what books, movies, and TV shows had led me to believe, Barbie Fairytopia being my only real reference, fairies didn't wear dresses. I leaned closer, spying a clothes tag sticking from his back. His satchel, or at least the faux leather holding it together, looked very similar to my mom's bag. He was definitely wearing the material of one of my father's old shirts. He wore a wry smile. I don't think I fully put into words what I was seeing, a real fairy sitting in my mother's flower garden. Unlike the boys at school who teased me for having holes in my shoes and no gym uniform, his smile was friendly. He stood, throwing out his arms to keep balance, and slowly I reached forward and plucked Grammy's ring from his curls, revealing his real crown, an entanglement of flowers, vines, and tiny mushrooms. "Here's your silver thingy." He gave his curls a shake, my Grammy's ring crowning him. "Can you maybe take it off my head?" He backed away, quickly hiding behind the shadow of a rosebud. "I'm not supposed to talk to you," he said, shifting nervously. "I didn't tell my father I was here, so I should probably go home before he, gets mad." I found myself wondering if placing him in a bell jar and using him as a lantern would help me sleep. His light stole away my breath. It pulsed like a living thing, spiderwebbing down delicate glass wings sticking from his back. But I did want to touch his light. I wanted to know if it was ice cold or maybe warm. I shook my head, shaking away the thought. I didn't realize I was shaking until I quickly retracted my hand, swiping my clammy fingers on my pajamas. I introduced myself, hesitantly holding out my palm. Mom told me she had only ever held a fairy once. Prince Jude. He smiled proudly, pointing to his crown. "Jude," he said, his wings twitching. He hopped onto my hand, wobbling and throwing his arms out to balance himself. Lit up in otherworldly golden light, his skin porcelain, almost translucent, wide green eyes blinked at me. Jude and I became friends, and he introduced me to his family. I spent a lot of time in the yard, so eventually Ross caught on. His father was understandably absent. He followed me one day, springing out at me when I was talking to Jude. Ross liked Jude, immediately holding out his palm for the fairy to land on. Initially, he thought I was talking to a butterfly, especially when he realized the fairy could help us with our light problem. Jude said, in exchange for our full names, he would happily act as light for us until we fell asleep. I was more than happy to comply. I gave him our names, and Jude became a regular visitor, sitting on top of the microwave with his legs swinging, illuminating the counter so we could prepare food. Jude showed off, dancing across my dead phone screen, causing it to flicker on and off. Ross was impressed, his eyes wide. "Wait, so you can make things actually work?" Jude shrugged. "If there's enough of us, sure." There was one night when Ross accidentally sat on him and he squeaked in pain, buzzing around like an angry mosquito, a glowing ball of light growing brighter and brighter until the whole room was lit up. It was so bright, like an overexposed photo, light bleeding into the darkness of the hallway, lighting up the living room doorway. Fairies don't like candy. I was surprised too. I grew up with Mom whispering in my ear, "Leave a berry at the bottom of the yard, and perhaps he will come see you." Ross apologized and Jude instantly forgave him, telling us anecdotes of his family and world, and how he had grown up as a reluctant prince. According to him, Jude didn't want to be a prince. However, as the son of the king, he was the rightful heir to the throne. Jude said his kind eat an assortment of foods but are carnivores. I offered Jude a chunk of gummy worm, and he spat it out. He showed me his teeth, elongated spikes, and I wished he hadn't. I guess I was just a kid. I thought fairies were mini versions of humans, with wings of a butterfly. When Mom described them, she always painted them as creatures from a fairy tale. I didn't expect them to have teeth sharp enough to rip through my finger. When Mom described them, she always painted them as creatures from a fairy tale. I didn't expect them to have teeth sharp enough to rip through my finger. I guess I was just a kid. I thought fairies were mini versions of humans with wings of a butterfly. When I turned 10 years old, I went to France on a school field trip for a week. Jude came to see me at night, sitting on my window, a glowing ball of orange, comforting me in the dark. Mom never came to tuck me in or say goodnight, so his light really did help. Still, Jude was my friend. He had sharp teeth, but he didn't scare me. I told Ross to look after Jude, and Jude to keep an eye on my brother. I spent the whole time missing Jude and his family, and my brother, who wasn't answering my texts or calls. I remember the France trip wasn't as fun as I thought it would be. I came down with food poisoning after eating slimy-looking clams. One girl puked all over her seat on the plane, and our teacher almost had a nervous breakdown. But it was my brother's lack of contact that contorted my gut into knots. I texted him almost 50 times over the duration of 3 days, and I didn't even get a read receipt. When I returned home, I was relieved to find Jude perched on a daffodil. He seemed quieter than normal, and I admit, as a 10-year-old kid, I wanted him to miss me and say how excited he was for me to be back. Jude didn't speak much at all that night. I remember it was summer, so I spent most of the afternoon and evening hanging out with him, but he didn't speak. Eventually, when I poked him, offering him honey, he was obsessed with honey. It's the fairy equivalent of getting high. He opened up to me, hopping onto my outstretched palm. "My friends are disappearing," he said softly. I noticed he was glowing brighter, all of the color drained from his cheeks, dark circles prominent under his eyes. He sighed, laying down in my palm. I liked that he trusted me enough to be vulnerable. Jude once told me his father was against him talking to humans. "Dad thinks it's a human," Jude sighed, rolling around in my palm, pressing his face into his arms. "The king saw us as parasites and evil, looming, monstrous things." I told him it's not. Humans are nice. "I have 2 human friends," he explained, in the gentlest of tones, and I could tell it really did hurt him to say it, that he couldn't see me anymore. He just told me it was nice knowing a friendly human, before hopping off my wrist and flying away, a single buzzing light disappearing into the trees. "He'll be king in a month, so Dad doesn't want me to explore anymore." Jude didn't say goodbye. I think he was too emotional. So, I did what I could. I set honey traps, trying to lure them out from wherever they were. I figured they had run away from home. I was determined to find his missing friends. I had the naive idea that finding them would bring Jude back and my kindness would prove humans are good and Jude's father was wrong about us. I drew up plans to find Jude's friends and bring them back to the kingdom. Ross had been quiet ever since I got back from France. "I'm reading," he grumbled, so I left him alone. Jude's friends were nowhere to be seen. I gave up halfway through summer vacation when it was clear Jude wasn't coming back and I was wasting my time. He said he was doing homework in his room, but when I bothered checking, he was curled up under his blankets with a flashlight, the beam illuminating his shadow. When I asked what he was doing, he held up a copy of Carrie. I didn't tell them about Jude or the fairies, or even where I lived. It had been months since I'd last seen him, and I had spent the majority of the time when I wasn't searching for the missing fairies, playing with my new friends. I was embarrassed of our neighborhood. I was embarrassed of our broken gate, our uncut lawn that was almost up to my knees, and my mother's refusal to actually be a parent. With these new friends, I could be a whole other person. Frankie without the father who left, and an alcoholic mother. However, when my friends were pulled inside for dinner, I had no choice but to return home. With Jude, it was bearable. Frankie, whose brother hadn't spoken to me in weeks. I could forget that I hadn't washed my hair in weeks because we didn't have money for shampoo, or that the other girls in class were already pointing out lice crawling in my hair. I stepped inside my house, surprised by the unfamiliar light of the TV. Without him, without my parents and brother and grandma, I was starting to feel empty. With Jude, I could forget about all of that. Mom was already passed out on the couch, but it looked like she'd been watching a game show. I had to shade my eyes, blinking through intense white light. Dad's crystal lamp, normally switched off, was lit up, brighter than normal. It was ice cold. I was so used to lukewarm. I opened the refrigerator, comforted by light, and pulled out a bottle of water. Mom had finally paid the electricity bill. I can't describe how fucking relieved I was. I had a hot shower and made myself a frozen meal. I could hear my brother playing video games, screaming threats at the screen. I poked my head through the door. "Did Mom pay the electricity bill?" Ross rolled his eyes, smashing buttons, slumped on his beanbag. "Obviously." "Is your flashlight faulty?" I asked. I glimpsed a faded glitter of light under his blankets. I threw a stuffed animal at him, and he, of course, lobbed it back, aiming for my face. My last home burglary didn't go as well as I had planned. There's no sugarcoating this. I used to break into homes to steal. And this particular house felt like stealing candy from a toddler. It belonged to an old woman who lived alone on a suburban street with few neighbors. I had been watching it since last year when a young couple lived there. When the old lady moved in a couple months ago, I saw the perfect opportunity. My partner in crime was my younger brother Paul, whom I was introducing to the subtle art of getting in and out. My methods, though, were never violent. We just waited until the owners left, went inside and took whatever electronics we could find. As usual, the week before we studied her routine, we parked in front of the house, memorized the time she watered the plants, took her afternoon naps, and most importantly, when she left. Every afternoon she was out for 1 to 2 hours. Once we confirmed the pattern, we made our move. When she drove away in her sedan, the action began. My brother parked right in front as I instructed. Taking advantage of the low foot traffic, we brought in a hand truck, duffel bags, and gloves. With a fake moving company sign on our van, no one would suspect a thing. Our phones were left in the car. A friend of mine got caught when his Bluetooth data showed up on a house gadget that freaked me out. We cleared out all the appliances, TVs, a washing machine, a fridge. Strangely, the old lady had never removed the framed photos of the previous family. "Now look for a safe," I told Paul, who was clumsily rummaging through jewelry. This was only his second break-in, and he was clearly nervous. He searched every room but found nothing, except for a large wooden door near the kitchen, locked. "Aha!" I heard him exclaim as he pulled a big iron key from a closet. "This must be for that door." He tried it, and it opened. It led to a staircase descending into a pitch-black basement. "Old folks like to keep their valuables as hidden as possible," I explained. "There might be something down there." We stepped down cautiously, relying on our flashlights to guide us. With each step, the smell worsened. It was like walking into an abandoned butcher shop. I felt along the wall for a switch and flipped it on. Nothing could have prepared us for what we saw. The room was small, its concrete walls soaked in deep red stains. Chains hung from the ceiling, hooks at the ends, embedded in large slabs of meat, or at least what looked like meat. Something about them wasn't right. They didn't look like they came from an animal. My brother gagged at the stench, ran to the corner, and threw up. I asked if he was okay. He nodded, wiped his mouth, and steadied himself. I wanted to get the hell out, but as I turned to leave, he pointed to something in the far corner. A human figure laid curled up, hugging its knees. A thick metal collar was locked around its neck, chained to the wall. It was a man, unconscious, severely malnourished, wearing nothing but boxer shorts. A small green light blinked on his collar. I recognized him as the man from the couple that lived here before the old lady. Paul stepped toward him and I grabbed his shoulder. "We need to leave. Now." "We can't just leave him here," he shot back. "Yes, we can," I insisted. "Our phones are in the car. We call the cops as soon as we get there." Of course, we'd have to explain why we were here in the first place, but this was too messed up to ignore. My brother didn't argue. Instead, he walked to a small equipment stand near the stairs, grabbed a medium-sized sledgehammer, and returned to the man. I was pissed, but followed him. We pushed the unconscious man aside so the chain lay flat on the ground. My brother swung the hammer. Nothing. I took it from him, put all my strength into a swing, and shattered the chain. "Paul, let's go," I said as he approached the man to lift him onto his shoulders. That's when the collar light turned red. The explosion slammed me against the wall hard, and the impact knocked me out. I opened my eyes a few minutes later and saw that the man's collar had exploded, taking half his body with it. Paul had been closer to him than I was and was lying on the floor, hurt but alive. I crawled to him, trying to wake him up, and it didn't work. Then a sharp pain shot through my leg, and I realized something had hit me down there. There was a lot of blood, and I couldn't stand properly. Trying to wake Paul was pointless, and I decided to get back up and call 911, fast. And that's what I did, dragging myself up the stairs. In extreme pain, I reached the phone in the living room. I was on the brink of passing out from blood loss when I gave the 911 operator the address. The moment I finished, I heard someone opening the front door and saw from the corridor two figures standing there. One was the old lady, staring at me with a blank, cold expression. The other was a large man in a black coat, standing behind her like a bodyguard. Then I blacked out. I woke up the next day in a hospital bed. I was handcuffed, and I started shouting and crying like a baby until a cop entered seconds later. "Where's Paul?" was the first thing I asked. It might not seem like it, but this was when my nightmare truly began. I told the police everything, the burglaries and what we had found, and they told me what happened. A patrol car arrived about 15 minutes after my call. They found me unconscious on the living room floor, soaked in blood. In the basement, they discovered all that flesh and gore, along with the mangled body of a man blown apart by the explosion, the man with the collar. My brother wasn't there anymore. Neither were the old lady and the man I had seen at the front door. The police said her modus operandi matched a case in another state where a woman fitting her description had taken over a house, tortured, and murdered the original residents. She was likely part of a larger group. I was never charged for the burglaries. They didn't really know what to do with me. I was a victim too. It took a few weeks, but as my leg healed, I was ready to drive again, and that's what I did. Every single day from that moment on, I'm driving around town for any clue that might lead me to the old lady. The cops won't update me, so I've decided to go search through every street and neighborhood in the goddamn country if I have to. I know she still has my brother. And Paul, if you're reading this somehow, please know I'm sorry your big brother couldn't save you. But I promise I'm going to find you and get you out of this even if it's the last thing I do. First came the headaches, then they appeared in the fields. I think my head is going to explode. The headaches began the first week of October. At first, merely a dull pressure behind my eyes that I attributed to stress, to insomnia, to the changing seasons. But by mid-November, they had evolved into something more insistent, a throbbing pulse that concentrated at my temples, sharpening at dusk and lingering until dawn. It was during one of these episodes, standing on the back porch of my childhood home with my palm pressed against my skull, that I saw the first one. Twilight was bleeding across the vast wildflower fields behind the house, a crumbling Victorian at the edge of town that had remained unoccupied since my mom's passing. I had retreated here last year seeking solace in familiar surroundings, a temporary escape from my city life after being disbarred for a pro bono case going sideways. I am beginning to forget the details. I think moving back here was a mistake. A singular figure, impossibly tall, standing motionless amidst the undulating grass. Its silhouette possessed a liquid quality that defied natural geometry. Limbs elongated beyond proportion, head featureless save for a mercurial shimmer that caught non-existent light. In its hand it carried something resembling a surveyor's instrument, though the tip pulsed with an arterial orange glow. Not blinked, attributing the vision to the headache, to perhaps a migraine aura manifesting in increasingly bizarre forms. The diagnosis came 3 weeks later, on a Thursday. Glioblastoma multiforme, grade IV. The MRI showed it nestled against my occipital lobe like a pale spider, tendrils stretching outward with quiet, methodical purpose. 6 months, Dr. Carlisle said, her voice maintaining the practiced neutrality of someone who had delivered such sentences before, perhaps 8 with treatment. That night I saw 2 figures instead of 1. By the time I received my diagnosis, I had seen several of them. Visual disturbances are to be expected, Dr. Carlisle explained during my follow-up appointment. The tumor's location makes hallucinations almost inevitable. Your brain is essentially creating sensory information that doesn't exist. They're methodical, I said. They're preparing something. She made a notation in my chart. The mind imposes patterns even in degeneration. It's rather remarkable. You don't understand. There were 4 of them last night. Dr. Carlisle's pen paused. 4, what, exactly? I couldn't articulate what I had seen without sounding deranged. How could I describe the way they drove luminous instruments into the earth in perfect geometric patterns? How they moved with synchronized precision despite their impossible anatomies? As the weeks passed, the headaches intensified, concentrated pressure like a vice tightening incrementally against my skull. The specialists increased my dexamethasone, adjusted my anticonvulsants, scheduled another MRI. The tumor had grown 17%. The prognosis contracted accordingly. Each evening their numbers continued to multiply. Dozens became hundreds. Hundreds became a small army that stretched toward the horizon, their movements increasingly elaborate, increasingly purposeful. They were constructing something, a lattice, a network, a scaffold of glowing orange filaments that formed an intricate grid across the entire field. 1 month after my diagnosis, I ventured into the field. The air changed texture as I stepped beyond the boundary of the porch. It pressed against my skin with palpable weight, as if the atmosphere itself had congealed into something viscous and resistant. My vision stuttered, reality fracturing into alternating states of presence and absence. One moment, the field teemed with their elongated forms, the next nothing but empty grassland stretched before me. The flickering accelerated until the 2 realities began to bleed together, superimposed like double-exposed film. Then, as abruptly as it had begun, the flickering ceased. A single figure stood before me. Its height easily 7 feet, registered first, followed by the deep, instinctual wrongness of its proportions. It did not stand so much as hover, its elongated limbs twitching with a slow liquid motion, as though its bones or whatever lay beneath its shifting skin were rearranging themselves in real time. Then it moved. Not a step, not a lunge, It simply shifted, closing the distance between us in a way that defied logic, as if the space between us had simply folded inward. I turned to flee. A shriek, high and choral, erupted behind me, burrowing into my skull with needlepoint precision. The air thickened, viscous and suffocating, as if unseen hands were pressing against my chest, slowing my movements, dragging me backward. My legs pumped uselessly against the ground, running, but not moving fast enough. The thing did not chase. It did not need to. It was everywhere at once, its limbs elongating, warping in my peripheral vision, closing in with that impossible fluid movement. The sound it made was not footsteps but a wet shifting, like muscle being stretched and snapped back into place. Then my agony. A limb? No, something worse. Lashed outward, impossibly fast. It did not strike me. It pierced me, sinking into my forearm like a hot wire through wax. Pain bloomed instantly, white-hot and electric, spreading through my nerves like wildfire. I collapsed. The world swam in a haze of pulsating orange light. When I looked up, the field was empty. But the pain remained, and so did the wound, throbbing with a rhythm that did not belong to me. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I sat in the dim glow of the bathroom light, my arm resting on the sink, the bandage unwrapped and discarded in the trash. The wound was still there, or maybe it wasn't. It hurt, regardless. The skin wasn't broken, there was no blood surfacing, but my skin was split like a crevice was opening, revealing something dark beneath the surface, veins threaded with faint orange light, glowing and pulsing. I ran a finger over and in it. It was all warm and smooth. Strange. I cleaned it anyway. I grabbed the bottle of hydrogen peroxide from the cabinet, poured it over my arm. Nothing. No fizzing. No bubbling. Not even the dull sting that should have come with an open wound. I wiped it down, slathered a thick layer of neosporin over the spot as if it would do anything. I pressed a new bandage over it, tighter this time. Maybe it wasn't real, but it hurt like it was. Pain comes from the brain, and my head was fucked. It throbbed at the base of my skull, radiating outward as if the tumor itself was reacting to what had happened. In the morning, I staggered into Greenwood Market, my arm burning as if injected with molten metal. The pain had spread, radiating upward toward my shoulder, following what I imagined were neural pathways. The cashier, a university student working summer break, dropped the carton of eggs he was scanning. "Jesus Christ, bro," he whispered. "What happened to your arm?" I froze, uncomprehending. "You can see it?" I asked. "Of course I can see it," his voice pitched higher. "It's glowing, like, actually glowing." "No, we're not. Dexter, we're monogamous. My boyfriend swears we're poly."
But the other girl isn't real?
"The hell do you mean we're not? Since when are we not?" Dexter moved away from the table and grabbed a new beer from the fridge. "Nia, are you messing with me right now?" "Me? Messing with you? You're the one who's texting in front of my face." "Like what?" "Mia, why are you being like this?" This whole thing blew up when I saw him message someone with a heart emoji, and it definitely wasn't his mom. Dexter's defense was that he was just texting his secondary, some girl named Sunny that I was supposed to know about. What arrangement? It was crazy talk. I couldn't believe he had the balls to pretend this was normal. I don't remember ever discussing a secondary person, or whatever this is. We've had this arrangement for over 2 years. What contract? He drank his beer, staring with his characteristic half-closed eyes, as if I had done something to bore or annoy him. "Do you want me to get the contract?" "The contract that we wrote together, that you signed." Wordlessly, he went into his room. I could hear him pull out drawers and shuffle through papers. I swirled my finger over top of my wine glass, wondering if this was some stupid prank his friends egged him into doing. Any minute now, he was going to come out with a bouquet and sheepishly yell April Fools. And then I was going to ream him out because this whole gag had been unfunny and demeaning and stupid. I was more confused than ever. Sure, yes, bring out the contract. But instead, he came out with a sheet of paper. It looked like a contract. Parties involved. Our polyamory relationship. Mia primary girlfriend. Sunny secondary girlfriend. Dexter boyfriend. Date. Redacted. Dexter and Mia primary partners, meaning their relationship takes priority in major life decisions, living arrangements, rent, etc. Respect the hierarchy. Dexter and Sunny share a secondary relationship. They reserve the right to see each other as long as it does not conflict with the primary relationship. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw my signature at the bottom. My curlicule looked pretty much spot on, but I didn't remember signing this at all. All parties recognize that this is an open, ethical, non-monogamous relationship with mutual respect. He rolled his eyes. Mia, come on. Dexter, I'm sorry, I don't remember signing this. Dexter, I struggled to find the right word. His face looked unamused, as if he was getting tired of my kidding around. I was shocked at how defensive he was. In being serious, I couldn't have signed this. Couldn't have. His side turned frustrated. Listen, if this is your way of renegotiating, that's fine. We can have a meeting. I'm always open to discussion, but there's no reason to diss Sunny like that. Dexter, I'm not trying to diss anyone. I'm not lying. I swear on my mom's grave. My own grave. I do not remember Sunny at all. He looked at me with a frown and shook his head, more disappointed than anything. Listen, we can have a meeting tomorrow. Just stop pretending you don't know her. I didn't want to prod the bear, so I laid off him the rest of the evening. We finished our drinks, watched some TV, then we went to sleep. The following morning Dexter dropped our weekend plans and made a reservation at a local sushi restaurant. Sunny was going to meet us there at noon for a renegotiation. I didn't know what to think. Over breakfast I made a few delicate inquiries over Sunny, but Dexter was still quite offended. Apparently this had been something all three of us had wanted. I found it hard to believe, but did not push it any further. Instead, I scrounged through the photos on my phone where I immediately noticed something was wrong. All three of us? There was a new woman in all of them. It was hard to explain. It's like someone had individually doctored all my old photos to suddenly fit an extra person into each one. Dexter and I had this one iconic photo from our visit to the epic suspension bridge, where we were holding a small kiss at the end of the bridge. We occupied most of the frame. Except now, when I looked at the photo, somehow there was this shadowy, taller woman behind both of us. She had her hands across both of our waists and was blowing a kiss towards the camera. Who? The sill. It was unsettling to say the least. She was in nearly every photo. Evenings out at restaurants, family gatherings, board game nights, weddings, even in photos from our vacations. Milan, Rome. She even fucking joined us inside the Sistine Chapel. I'm not going to beat around the bush. This was some kind of photoshopped model, like a Kylie Jenner-esque Kardashian type. It felt like some influencer turned actress turned philanthropist just so happened to bump into two bland Canadians. It didn't look real. The photos were too perfect. There wasn't a single one where she had half her eyes closed or was caught mid-laugh or anything. It's like she had rehearsed a pose for each one. The strangest part was her look. The whole vibe was disturbing. I wanted to confront Dexter the moment I saw this woman, this succubus, this whatever she was. But he went for a bike ride to clear his head. It was very typical of him to avoid confrontation. Originally, he was supposed to come back, and then we'd both head to the restaurant together, but he didn't come back. What the fuck was going on? Dexter texted me instead to come meet him at the restaurant. That he'll be there waiting. The restaurant was a Japanese omakase bar, small venue, no windows. This was one of our favorite places because it wasn't too overpriced, but still had a classy vibe. I felt a little betrayed that we were using my favorite date night restaurant for something so auxiliary. If you could call it sitting, it almost looked like he was kneeling, holding both of her hands, as if he had been sharing the deepest, most important secrets of his life for the last couple hours. My sense of betrayal ripened further when I arrived 10 minutes early only to see Dexter already at the table, and he was sitting next to her. So glad this could work out this way. I could hear the faint echo of his whisper as I walked in. For a moment I wanted to turn away. How long have they been here? Is this an ambush? Mia, over here. But then Sunny spotted me from across the restaurant. Her wide eyes glimmered in the restaurant's soft lighting, zeroing in on me like a hawk. Somehow her words traveled 30 feet without her having to raise her voice. I walked up feeling a little sheepish, but refusing to let it show. I wore what my friends often called my resting defiant face, which can apparently look quite intimidating. Mia, join us. Come sit. Sunny patted the open space to her left. Her nails had to be at least an inch long. It was hard to look her in the eyes. I smiled and sat on Dexter's right. Sunny cut right to it. So, Dexter says you've been having trouble in your relationship? Staring at her seemed strangely entrancing. The word tunnel vision immediately came to mind, as if the world around Sunny was merely an echo to her reverberating bell. I meant in your relationship to our agreement. Sunny's smoky voice lingered on each word. Dexter says you're trying to back out of it. Trouble? No. Dex and I are doing great. I turned to face Dexter, who looked indifferent as usual. I wouldn't say there's any trouble. Am I even sure this drink is safe? I poured myself a cup of the green tea to busy myself. Anything to avert her gaze. However, as soon as I brought the ceramic cup to my lips, I reconsidered. I cleared my throat and did my best to find a safe viewing angle of Sunny. As long as I looked away between sentences, it seemed like the entrancing tunnel vision couldn't take hold. Listen, I'm just gonna be honest. It's very nice to meet you, Sunny. You look like a very nice person. But I don't know you, like at all. When I glanced over, Sunny was suddenly backlit, like one of the restaurant lamps had lowered itself to make her hair look glowing. Don't know me. Of course you know me. We've known each other since high school. Worse yet, I suddenly remembered things. As soon as she said the words, I got a migraine. I suddenly remembered the time we were at our grade 11 theater camp where I had been paired up with Sunny for almost every assignment. We had laughed at each other in improv and belted from our belts in singing. Our final mini-project was a duologue, and we were assigned Romeo and Juliet. I can still feel the warmness of her hand during the rehearsal, the small of her back, her young gorgeous smile which has only grown kinder with age. And even after high school, Sunny continued, looking at me with her perfectly tweezed brows. Are you saying you forgot our whole trip through Europe? It was there, during our improvised dance scene between Romeo and Juliet, where I had my first urge to kiss her. She would always be there for me. Bright purple lights, music festival, Belgium. I was doing a lot more than just kissing Sunny. Some of these dance floors apparently let just about anything happen. My mind was assaulted with salacious imagery, breasts, thighs, a throbbing want in my entire body. I had seen all of Sunny, and she had seen all of me. We've been romantically entwined for ages. We might have been on and off for a couple years, but she was always there for me. I smacked my plate, trying to mentally fend off the onslaught of so much imagery. It's not real. It feels real, but it's not real. It can't be real. When did we order food? Well, Dexter asked. He was offering me some of his dynamite roll. I politely declined and cleared my throat. There was still enough of me that knew Sunny was manifesting something. Somehow she was warping past events in my head. I forcibly stared at the empty plate beneath me. I don't know what's going on, but both Dexter and I are leaving. Dexter scoffed. Leaving? I don't think so. No one's leaving until you tell us what's wrong. Sunny's smoky voice sounded more alluring the longer I wasn't looking. That's how our meetings are supposed to work, remember? I could tell she was trying to draw my gaze, but I wasn't having it. I slid off my seat in one quick movement. Dexter grabbed my wrist. Dexter let go. I took this as an opening and backed away from the booth. We struggled for a few seconds before Sunny stood up and assertively pronounced, "Darlings, please, there is no need for this to be embarrassing." Hey, I wrenched my hand. Let go. And what a booth it was. The lighting was picture perfect. Sunny had the most artistically pleasing arrangement of sushi rolls I'd ever seen. Seaweed, rice and sashimi arranged in flourishes that would have made Wes Anderson melt in his seat. I turned and bolted. "Mia!" Dexter yelled. At the door, I pulled the handle and ran outside. Only I didn't enter the outside lobby. I entered the same sushi restaurant again. The hell? I turned around and looked behind me. There was Sunny sitting in her booth. And then I looked ahead, back in front. Sunny, sitting in her booth. A mirror copy? The door opened both ways into the same restaurant. It's like they were all glued shut. I tried to look for any other exit. I ran along the left side of the wall, away from Sunny's booth, towards the washroom. There had to be a back exit somewhere. I found the washrooms, the kitchen, and the staff rooms, but none of the doors would open. What's going on? What is this? Everything was totally empty except for Sunny's beautifully lit booth. She watched me patiently with a smile. Wiping my tears, I wandered back into the restaurant, realizing in shock that we were the only patrons here. We were the only people here. Relationship with Sunny. What is happening is that we need to renegotiate. Sunny cleared some food from the center of the table and presented a paper contract. What is happening? There was no use hiding the fear in my voice. Parties involved. Primary boyfriend Dexter. Primary girlfriend Sunny. Date redacted. Tertiaries see Appendix B. Secondaries: Mia, Maxine, Jasper, Theo, Victor, Noe, Mateo, Claudine. Mia will be given 30 days to find new accommodations. Dexter recommends returning to her parents' place in the meantime. The changeover. Mia is allowed to keep any and all of her original possessions. Avoiding Sunny's gaze, I instead turned to Dexter, who stared at me with a loosely apologetic frown. Dexter, what is all this? My jaw dropped. What the fuck? We just moved in together like 6 months ago. You can't be serious. It is saying I have to move? He cleared his throat and flattened his shirt across his newly formed pecs and six-pack. What is going on? I am serious, Mia. I've done some thinking. You don't have what I want. Dexter, listen to me. I'm telling it to you straight as it is. Something's fucked. Don't follow Sunny. I pointed at her without turning a glance. You are like ensorcelled or something. If you care at all about yourself, your well-being, your future, just leave. This is not worth it. This isn't an event about me anymore. Your life is at risk here. There was some kind of aura exuding from Dexter now. He looked cleaner and better shaven than before. His cheekbones might have even been higher too. I didn't know how much this had to do with Sunny's influence, but I tried to see past it. I spoke to him as the boyfriend I had dated for over 2 years. Sunny laughed a rich, lugubrious laugh and then drank some elaborate cocktail in the corner of my eye. Well, I want to stay with her, Dexter said, and you need to sign to make that happen. His finger planted itself on the contract. If you don't sign, Sunny's smoky voice traveled right up to both my ears, as if she was whispering into both at the same time. You can never leave. Suddenly, all the lamps in the restaurant went out. All the lamps except our booths. It's like we were featured in some commercial. Dexter, you can't stay. Sign it. All around me was pitch darkness. Was I even in a restaurant anymore? A cold, stifling tightness caused my back to shiver. Sunny stared at me with completely black eyes. No iris, no sclera, pure obsidian. Good. Sunny snatched the page away, vanishing it somewhere behind her back. She smiled and sipped from her drink. You know, Mia, I don't think Dexter has ever loved you to begin with. Let's be honest. I signed on the dotted line. My curlicule never looked better. Her all-black eyes found mine again. I was flooded with more memories. Dexter forgetting our anniversary, his inappropriate joke by my dad's hospital bed, the time he compared my cooking to a toddler's in front of my entire family. My headache started to throb. In response, I unzipped my purse and pulled out my pepper spray. The yellow spray shot her right in the face. She screamed and turned away. I masked the fuck out of Sunny. Dexter grabbed my arm. I grabbed his in return. Now, Dexter, let's get out of here. Forget Sunny. Fuck this contract. I can't believe you, Mia. Pepper spray? Are you serious? But he wrestled my hand and pried the pepper spray from my fingers. His chiseled jawline abruptly disappeared. He looked upset. His face was flush with shock and disappointment. Suddenly the lights were back and we weren't alone in the restaurant. The patrons around me looked stupefied by my behavior. People around began to cough and waft the spray away from their table. I stepped back from our booth, which looked the same as the other booths. Sunny was keeled over in her seat, gagging and trying to clear her throat. A waiter shuffled over to our table asking what had happened. A child across from us began to cry. This time I had no trouble entering the lobby. This time I had no trouble escaping back outside. I tore away and sprinted out the doors. I moved away from Dexter the next day, told my family it was an emergency. They asked if he was being abusive, if I should involve the police in the situation. I said no, because it wasn't quite exactly like that. I didn't know exactly what was going on, except that I needed to get away. I just wanted to go. After that evening, 30 months of relationship had just gone up in smoke. All my memories of Dexter were now terrible. I figured some of them had to be true. He was far from the perfect boyfriend, but for all of them to be rotten, that couldn't be right. Why would I have been with someone for so long if they were so awful? In the effort of maintaining my self-respect, I convinced myself that Dexter was a good guy, that his image had been slandered by Sunny, which is still the only explanation I have, that she had altered my memories of him. I'm sorry I couldn't help you, Dexter, but the situation was beyond me. I hope you're able to find your own way out of it too. There's nothing else I can do. Although I've distanced myself away from Dexter and moved back in with my parents in a completely different part of the city, I still haven't been able to shake Sunny. She still texts me. I don't know who or what she is, but every time I see her, I get flooded with more bogus romantic events of our shared past. Our trip to Nicaragua. She keeps asking to meet up. Apparently we're due for a catch-up. I see her randomly in coffee shops and food courts, but I always pack up and leave. Our skiing staycation. It's reached a point where I can tell the memories are fake by the sheer volume. There's no way I would have had the time, not to mention the money to go to half these places I'm suddenly remembering. Our St. Patrick's Day at the beach. I just want my own life, and my own inside my head back. I want to start making memories that I know are real. Thanks to my family lineage, I have an Italian passport. I'm going to try and restart my life somewhere around Florence, but who knows, I might even move to Spain or France. I know it's a big sudden change, but after these last couple months I really need a way to reclaim myself. So I'm saving up to move away. Places I've been to, people I've seen. I want memories that belong to no one else but me. They're everywhere now. Are any of you still normal? I take the subway to and from work every day. It's routine, nothing special. Just me, a train, and a few dozen exhausted commuters trying to make it through another day. This all started on Monday night. Monday. He was sitting across from me, 3 seats down, staring, grinning. Not like a normal smile, this was something else. Too wide, too sharp. His arms rested in his lap, but they were too long, elbows bending at the wrong angles. His fingers were thin and segmented, almost like extra joints had been slipped in where they didn't belong. I tried to ignore him, focused on my phone, but I could feel his eyes. And when I got off the train, I made the mistake of looking back through the window. He was still staring. Tuesday. There were 2 of them now. The long-armed man was in the same seat, but next to him was a woman with wax-pale skin stretched too tight over her skull. And beneath the harsh train lights, I swear I saw veins shifting beneath her skin like something was crawling inside. Neither of them blinked. Neither of them moved. I called my friend Luke. Dude, it's the subway. Creeps are part of the package. I laughed, even though I didn't feel like laughing. But when I got off the train that night, I glanced at the window again. They both waved. Wednesday. The next morning, I took a different carriage to my usual. I stepped onto the train, still half asleep, and felt it instantly. They were there too. There were 4 of them now. The grinning man, the waxy woman, a bald guy with an open-mouthed smile that never moved, and a kid with solid black eyes. I held onto the pole near the door, hard hammering. They didn't move with the train. Every normal commuter swayed with the motion, shifting their weight. They didn't. By the time I got to work, I felt sick. And the trip home that night, there were far too many still, watching bodies scattered through the carriage. Some were sitting, some were standing. All of them were grinning. That night, I called my mother. Something's happening, I said. People are wrong. She just sighed. Honey, you work too much. You're overtired. Get some rest. She sounded bored, like she wasn't even really listening. Thursday. They're everywhere. At the coffee shop, the barista's wrists had too many fingers growing from them. At lunch, I saw a man take multiple huge bites of his sandwich without chewing. On the street, a homeless man's face looked like rotting wax, sagging and shifting as he turned toward me. I gave Luke an update. Okay, that's actually messed up, he admitted. Maybe it's a prank? I was about to agree, and then he said, or maybe you're just seeing them for what they really are now. I laughed, but it came out forced. What? He shrugged. Too casual, too normal. Nothing, man. Just saying. Friday. It was late when I left the office. Everyone else had gone home except Karen, the receptionist. She sat at her desk, scrolling on her phone, half asleep as I walked by. Night, Karen, I muttered. She didn't respond right away. And when she did, when I was almost past her desk, her voice sounded wrong. Night. I turned back to glance at her, and in the dim light her shadow-stretched face looked too smooth, too pale. Her smile was too wide, her eyes too dark. My stomach dropped. I kept walking. Didn't run. Didn't react. But I knew. She was one of them. Saturday. I woke up praying I was losing my mind, that this was some stress-induced breakdown. But the second I stepped outside, I knew I was screwed. They were everywhere now. Not just some, not a few. Everyone. The coffee shop, the gas station, the people waiting at the bus stop, the couple walking their dog, except the dog had human eyes. I called my mom. I don't know why. I needed to hear her voice. She picked up on the second ring. "Mom," I whispered. "Something's wrong. I think I need help." Silence. And then, in the same flat, tired tone she used earlier this week, "Oh, honey," she murmured. "We've been waiting for you to notice." I hung up. I saw no other option. I took a cab to the hospital, my hands shaking. "I need help," I told the receptionist. "Something's happening to me, to everyone." She gave me a long, slow smile. Her lips didn't stop stretching. "Of course," she murmured. "Come right this way." She led me down a dimly lit hallway, past rooms where doctors with grinning faces hovered over patients, too many hands pulling at their skin. I turned to run, and a nurse grabbed my wrist. Her fingers were too long, too strong. Her grip sent ice through my veins. "You don't need to be afraid," she whispered. Her mouth opened too wide, too wide, too wide. I ripped myself free. I ran. I don't know how I got out. I don't remember the streets, or the subway, or unlocking my front door. But I'm here now, and I can hear them outside. Sunday. They knock every few minutes. Not pounding, just gentle tapping. I don't know what's happening. I don't know if I'm crazy, if something changed in me, or in the world itself. I just need to know, has anyone else noticed them? Please. If you're still normal, if you still see people the way they're supposed to be, tell me. Tell me they haven't gotten to you too. My fiance wanted me to be more than just his wife. "Don't be nervous. They are going to love you. I promise." My fiance David told me as he grabbed my hand to kiss it. I looked over to his side of the car as he lowered our interlocked fingers to rest on his leg. I couldn't believe the happiness I felt at that moment. As I watched him sing along to the music that played in the car, I counted my blessings. Up until last year when we met, I had given up on love. I thought no man would ever live up to my standards. Or maybe I was unlovable. Well, none of it ever mattered anymore because I found him. The light of the sun came through the sunroof and bounced off his face. The large pine trees that lined the dirt road cast a shadow over him every few seconds. I felt mesmerized by him. He got to know me so fast in such a short amount of time. The good, the ugly, all of it. It all felt so right. I wanted to spend the rest of my life with him. Funny how such deep feelings can change so fast. Nothing ever seemed off about David. Maybe I was blinded by the love bombing or by the desperation I had to be needed by someone. He was so agreeable, never wanted to argue, and told me he loved me early on. The only thing that felt wrong was that it felt too right. I don't have anyone close in my life I could get advice from. I have a single mother who hasn't cared about me since I moved out at 18. I don't think she cared about me when I lived under her roof. Honestly, I have no siblings. I've never met my dad, and I don't have many friends. That's probably one of the reasons why he chose me. After hours in the car, we made it to his family home. Stepping out of the car, I was relieved to stretch. We walked up to the front door, and I nervously locked my arm around his. The door opened up just before we could knock. "Oh, hi, I'm so happy to meet you both. I'm Lacey," I timidly exclaimed. They both paused for what felt like a lifetime before a large smile grew on the woman's face. She leaned forward and gave me a hug that felt just slightly too long and too tight. As she pulled away, she grabbed my shoulders. "You are so beautiful," she told me. "Mom, come on," David said, embarrassed from behind me. "It's fine, David. I don't mind getting compliments," I responded with a grin, not knowing if I really was okay with it yet. "Don't mind her, Lacey. She doesn't know how to set boundaries with anyone." The tall man in the doorway said to me with a chuckle, "Hi, I'm Pate. We are so glad you came to meet us. We've heard so many wonderful things about you." As he finished his sentence, he nudged his wife, who seemed too distracted by me to hear what he said. "Oh, sorry, dear. I must have zoned out for a moment there. I'm Linda. You both are totally fine. I feel like I know you both so well. Alrighty, the introductions are hardly necessary. That's so sweet of you to say. The feeling is mutual. Well, come on in. Come on in, Linda said as she gestured for me and David to come inside. As we walked in together, I was welcomed with a strange feeling in my gut. The house felt too big, but also claustrophobic. The family seemed happy to see me, but it also didn't feel completely genuine. Maybe they just had a fight, I thought to myself. David seemed a little antsy as well, but I figured it was just nerves from us all meeting for the first time. The rest of the night was uneventful. Dinner and card games. It was getting late, so I was given a quick tour of where my room was, and anything else I might need in the night. David walked me to my room as his parents went to bed. Thanks for understanding why we should have separate rooms. You know how Mom and Dad are, David said as he opened the squeaky wooden door. Oh, it's no trouble at all, I get it. I wouldn't want to make anyone uncomfortable, I whispered as I tried to lean in for a kiss. Sorry, I don't want to kiss in front of them either. It might be weird, he said as he winced and dodged my kiss. Sure, I guess that's okay, I replied with squinted, confused eyes. I didn't think it was weird to stay in different rooms. I know some people think that is unacceptable, but David's whole family took that sort of thing very seriously. We had shared a bed before in the past, but only for actual sleeping, if you get what I mean. David was clear from the beginning of our relationship he didn't want anything physical until marriage. Kissing was normally fine, but that was the limit for him. I didn't mind, I always found it romantic. We said our goodnights and I went to check out my bed. It all seemed fairly average, but I still hadn't shaken that feeling from when I walked in. It wasn't as bad as before, but I still felt uncomfortable. The air was stuffy and the bedding was stiff. Every small thing made it hard to get comfortable, and I found myself shifting a lot. The house was so squeaky I couldn't figure out if it was the family walking around or just the product of an old home settling. Before I knew it, I was woken up by a sunbeam coming through the window in the morning. I could hear the hustle and bustle of breakfast being made downstairs. I made my way down the steps and heard the family informing each other that I was awake in a whispered tone. As I turned the corner and looked into the kitchen, they all sat at the table smiling at me. A huge, extravagant breakfast lay across the table. More food than we would ever eat, like you see a housewife make in a movie. Oh, all for me. You didn't have to. I could have at least helped a little bit, I commented with a laugh and wide eyes looking at a massive pile of waffles. I sat down and started to load up my plate. It wasn't until a minute in that I realized no one was talking or eating. I felt so rude for not saying more. I was just so excited for the meal, and I'm never a big talker in the morning. When I looked up at them, I was met with that terrible feeling again, but so much stronger. They all just smiled at me. So big it looked like their lips were starting to tremble. They sat with both hands in front of them, folded. You guys good? Please eat, I said, trying to hide my nerves but failed miserably. You know, we are just so happy to have you around, Lacey. You are just so perfect, Linda said to me through her smile. I nearly choked on my waffles. Saying I was beautiful was one thing, but perfect? After knowing me for less than 24 hours? Lacey is right. Let's all eat together, David said. His parents nodded in agreement and started to fill up their plates. The rest of the meal felt awkward with little talking. After I was done eating, David insisted. The two of us went for a walk around the property alone. We walked a little ways from the house, and he apologized to me for all the weird behavior. I know Mom and Dad are acting weird, and hell, I'm probably a little off too. And I'm really sorry for that. My parents have been through a lot in the last couple of years and rarely leave that old house. They really only see each other and me now, so I think they forget to act around other people. I guess I was playing along a bit to make them feel better, but honestly, I have forgotten how to act when around my parents and someone new. We are all so happy to have you here. I knew it might be a little strange, but it's all with love. I promise. As he finished his sentence, he put his arm around me as we walked. I knew his explanation didn't make me feel completely better, but at least helped it make the smallest amount of sense. I was still weirded out, but felt more comfortable with staying there. As we walked around the 50-acre property, I noticed many things that helped them live almost completely off the grid. Solar panels and crops made me realize how self-sufficient they were, how they really didn't need to leave for many reasons. He showed me the small duck pond that had 2 little tire swings hanging from a tree. Then we neared the house again, and I saw 2 playhouses a few feet from each other. When I thought about it, I remembered seeing more things that came in twos on our walk. David, why did you have 2 swings by the pond? Oh, you know, if Mom or Dad wanted to play on one with me, he replied while scratching his neck. Really? How did they fit? They kinda look like small swings, I said with a chuckle. Yeah, I don't know. I guess they just squeezed in. Well, what about the playhouses? Why would you need two? Because I asked for two of them, he said while looking away from me. You got me there, I said with a laugh. I should read his uncomfortably better at that moment. I was being dismissive of odd behavior because of his explanation at the start of our walk. I kept on just goofing around with him. We got back to the house, and David said he wanted to talk with his parents alone for a minute. His parents, who still had big fake smiles plastered on their faces, accepted his request. I went into my bedroom and shut the door. I put my ear to the door to try and eavesdrop. I normally wouldn't do something like that, but with how weird everything was, I couldn't resist. All I could hear was a panicked tone. From all three of them, it was in whispers and frantic. Not like he was yelling at them, but worried. After around 10 minutes, David came to my room and let me know he talked to them. When I came back into the kitchen, everyone seemed more relaxed. It felt a little forced, but it was far less scary than the painted-on smiles. The rest of the day was laid back for the most part. We ate and played some more card games. Then it got dark out and things got really weird. We sat down to play Clue, and Linda insisted I played Miss Scarlet. I chose Mr. Green as I have since I was a kid, but she kindly told me to switch characters. We all looked at each other. I looked at the rest of the family, trying to understand if she was serious or not. They all made a face at her to stop, but she pressed on. Lacey, that's just how we do things around here, so please choose Miss Scarlet, Linda said through clenched teeth. Why do I murmured as she stood to her feet to face me. Okay, I said as I grabbed the Miss Scarlet token. Yay, I love it when you play Miss Scarlet. It makes me so happy, Linda said with glee. When I play Miss Scarlet, what do you mean? This is the first time we have played Clue together, I said under my breath, while David put his hand on my knee and shook his head at me. They played the rest of the game like nothing happened. That's when I started to question staying another night. I didn't feel safe anymore. Even if David was in my room, he seemed to turn into putty around his parents. I wanted to marry him. I was in love, and wanted to make it work. How could such a short amount of time shift how I felt? After the game, Linda wanted to all sit around and look at some family photos. Pete seemed a little hesitant about it, but I know how convincing Linda can be. We all sat on the couches in front of the fireplace. Linda made us all hot chocolate and grabbed blankets. This exact scenario would be my dream, typically. My whole body told me I should be relaxed. I was warm. I was with the love of my life. Everyone was laughing and reminiscing, but I felt so cold, so scared. How would I explain to David that I wanted to leave? Yes, he should understand and put me first, but this was so important to him. I was so zoned out of the conversation, only thinking about how to get out of that damn house. The stories they told went in one ear and out the other, and then all at once I snapped back to reality when I noticed something odd about some pictures. Most of them were of David as a boy, playing in the yard, at a birthday party, and around the house, with him in the center of the photo. Some photos, however, looked off. They weren't a standard size. They looked like they had been hand-cut with scissors. I could see slightly uneven edges. Also, the composition of the photos was slightly off. David would be far to the right or left with a random slice of the photo cut out. I was now paying extra close attention, asking lots of questions to try and get one of them to trip up about why someone or something was cut out of them. I knew if I outright asked, I could make Linda angry. Linda took out one particular photo and quickly put it in her pants pocket. Her eyes got wide as saucers and she looked at her husband. I think that's enough for tonight. It's late. Good night, everyone, she said, as she stood to her feet and went to her room. I looked at Pete to see his reaction, and he met me with an eye roll. I was confused by this response, but didn't know what I was looking for. I glanced at David and he shrugged his shoulders and gestured to our rooms. We walked to my room and I asked David to step in with me. He was a little hesitant, but I convinced him. What the hell was that photo and why did it end the whole night? I said angrily. Lacey, chill. It was probably a picture of my dad's ex-girlfriend. Sometimes pictures of her just end up in boxes because my dad is lazy and doesn't organize stacks of old photos before putting them in those big boxes. It's happened before. It's not a big deal, they are just dramatic about it. Sogan Suttat 4. It's not a big deal, they are just dramatic about it. What? That doesn't make much sense. I promise it's okay. Haven't you noticed they are kinda weird? he said with a laugh. Yeah, I kinda wanted to talk to you about that. Talk about what? He shuffled nervously. I think we should leave tonight. I know this means a lot to you, but trust me. I need to get to know your parents better slowly. This is too much all at once. I hope they don't hate me for this, and I especially hope you don't hate me for this, but please listen. I confessed as I grabbed his hands. I'm not mad, I understand and was worried this would happen. They are a lot sometimes, and I should expected this to be too much. What if I stay in your room tonight, and we leave in the morning? It just would be easier to head out, first thing. I didn't love that answer. In fact, I hated it. One more night sounded like hell. I knew it would be easier with him beside me, but my fight or flight was kicking in and it was telling me to run as fast as I could. Unfortunately, like an idiot, I agreed. I told him I just needed some water and a quick snack and I'd be back in bed. Heading back down the stairs, I wondered if I should just leave. Was David worth all this? As my mind was racing, I stopped in front of the cracked bedroom door of Linda and Pete. I knew if I could see the ex-girlfriend in that picture, it would give me the sliver of confidence I needed to stay the night. I knew deep down something else was in that photo. I could hear both of them snoring and I could see the pants she was wearing just inside the door. There is no way she left the photo in the pants, I thought to myself. But I had to try. I pushed the door open with a squeak. Ugh, why did those doors have to be so squeaky? I grabbed the pants and heard rustling from the bed but ignored it in the hopes they would settle. I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I reached into the pants and I couldn't believe what I felt. She actually left it in her pocket. I pulled the photo out face down. I wanted to see the picture so badly, but now that it was in my hand, I was so scared to see it. As I sat on the cold tile floor, I heard the family start to walk up. David was coming down the stairs and I heard the dreaded squeak of the master bedroom door. I heard a whispered panic tone. Where did she go? Listening closely, I heard lights start to be turned on and walking around the house, trying to calmly find me. I looked down at my hand and turned the photo around. I couldn't believe it. The photo was of me as a little girl. Maybe 7 or 8? It wasn't a photo I gave to them. I had only shown David digital photos of me as a kid. Even worse, I didn't recognize the photo. Sure, you don't know every picture ever taken of you, but I had on a shirt I didn't recognize, and I saw a pond I didn't recognize. No wait, my heart froze. It was the pond on their property I saw earlier in the day. Why was I here as a kid? Why am I here now? I reached for my phone to try and call the police. It was low odds I could get reception, but it was worth a try. After patting all my pockets, I realized I lost my phone. Of course, the one time I don't take my phone with me is when I need it most. Bathroom, bathroom. I heard a whisper from the kitchen, then the haunting cracks from the hardwood floor moving towards me. I held my breath and sat perfectly still. They knew I was there. They were coming for me, but I tried to convince myself I had a chance still, that if I didn't move, I would disappear. In my silence, the brass doorknob jiggled. I heard Linda clear her throat. Hey Lacey, sweetie, are you feeling all right? Please, I want to go home. I don't know what's going on, but I want to leave. This is too weird. I'm sorry, David. I tried. I really tried. Get me out of here, I yelled as I hit the bathroom wall in a rage. Lacey, I don't think you understand. You can't leave, David somberly said with his mouth right by the door. Like hell I can't. No, you belong here now. You are a part of the family. I could hear the sick smile David wore on his face from the other side of the old wooden door. This is what you wanted, isn't it? A family, people to depend on. Yes, of course. I wanted a family, but not like this. Not this bad. Lacey, open the door, Pete commanded. Why on earth would I do that? If you don't let us in, we will come in. The sound of Pete's voice bounced in the air. A long pause as we all waited to see how the next couple of seconds would unfold. I backed up into the bathtub. It was the farthest away from the door I could possibly get. My back was flush against the wall in hopes I would disappear into it. The silence in the air was broken when I heard a long sigh and the sound of heavy, angry footsteps heading away from me. Then followed by a loud door opening and closing. I was terrified at the thought of why he left. My mind tried to tell me he gave up, but my anxiety told me the worst was yet to come. Moments later, I heard the door open and close again. It was paired with the booming voice of Pete. Lacey, I am coming in there to get you. I swear if you don't get back from that damn door. Dad, what are you doing? David spoke up in my defense. She will stand back. She's smart. Bang. Bang. A sledgehammer came smashing through the thin door. Just like a horror movie, Pete's large arm came through the new hole in the door and unlocked the door from the inside. The door came flying open, and I was met with David and his parents staring at me. Their expressions were hard to read. Sadness filled their eyes while they clenched their fists in anger. David chewed his lips nervously while Linda took short, shallow breaths. Pete started to move towards me, his sledgehammer still ominously in his stone-cold grasp. As he got closer, he raised it above his head. I felt at that moment I was going to die. I now unfortunately understand what people mean when they say their life flashed before their eyes. I thought about how I'd never know my father, how I would never have a good relationship with my mother, the children I'd never have, the places I'd never go. I wondered what I did to deserve this. Why me? Why David? Why? My eyes closed as I prepared for my end. I could feel a tear well up as I heard David speak. Dad, what are you doing? All this for nothing? Stop. I opened my wet eyes to see David sprint towards me, tackling Pete into the wall. You can't do this. You are letting your anger take over again. You promised this wouldn't happen. Again? Are you serious? Pete replied as he pulled himself out from the now broken wall and pushed his son off him. You know damn well it wasn't my fault. Stop denying it, David said. She fell down those steps because you pushed her. You have to stop blaming me. It was your mom who killed her. She knew how drunk Abby was. She could barely walk straight. You tell me why your mom thought it would be a good idea to ask Abby to go downstairs and get her something that drunk. Then she had to hit her head on the way down. Stop it, Pete. We are supposed to be on the same team here. Stop pretending David didn't throw her down the steps after she was already dead to cover up the murder. I know she was already dead. I don't know how you killed her, but I know you did. I know it, Linda said as she put her head in her hands. Budu, who is Abby, what did you people do? I said with a shaky whimper. Linda lifted her head out of her hands and left my sight. The two men stood up and walked to block the door. Linda soon reappeared around the corner with a cloth in her hand. David and his mother walked back towards me. I tried to fight back as David got close to me. I wanted to fight with all my strength. I knew I needed to bite, scratch, and do anything I could, but I just couldn't. I still didn't see David the same as I did even an hour ago, but I couldn't hurt him. He got my arms behind my back as Linda walked to me with the rag in her hand. I was greeted with the sweet smell of chloroform. I tried to fight the fading feeling as I locked eyes with David. It's okay, he whispered softly as I fell into darkness. The next thing I knew, I was waking up. I blinked over and over again, trying to get my eyes to focus. I felt dizzy and out of it. I hoped and prayed that as my eyes started to work, I would see my room at home. I hoped I'd see my Pulp Fiction poster on the wall or my knitted green blanket. I rubbed my eyes and was heartbroken to not see my comfy room. Not just that, but I'd never seen this room before. It had pink walls with big flowers all over them, now covered with vinyl records and band posters. A room that was once for a little girl but had the fingerprints of a girl trying so desperately to grow up. As my eyes scanned the room, I saw a name on the wall. Abby. My heart fell to my knees. I sat in bed trying to gather my thoughts and everything that was happening. Nervously, I picked at my shirt only to find I was in PJs. I didn't recognize. I got overwhelmed at the thought of someone taking off my old clothes and putting me in these new pajamas. The faint sound of music started to fill my ears. I slowly walked to the door and pressed my ear against it. Dancing music, laughing, talking. What was going on? I looked around the room to try and plot a way out. The window was shut and I couldn't get it to open. I thought I could maybe slam something into the window to break it, but if I failed, I thought the consequences could be far worse. I cracked the door open and quietly as I could, I tiptoed to my original room in the house and looked for my phone with no luck. In fact, none of my stuff was in there. Hope felt so lost. I was terrified. After weighing my options for a few minutes, the only idea I had was to just sprint out the front door and keep running up the road. The house was in the middle of nowhere, miles and miles beyond their property before anyone or anything, but I had to try. I took 3 big deep breaths and ran for it, down the hallway and stairwell, around the corner and to the door, telling myself the whole time to not look at them, pretend they don't exist. When I ran into the door, I tried to turn the knob but found a large lock on the door. Glancing up at the family, I was met with worried faces. "What's wrong, Abby? Don't you want some breakfast?" Linda said with a plate in her hand. Abby? Why? Why did you call me that? I panicked. Oh, come on, Abby, don't start with us. Come have some breakfast, Pete said with a friendly chuckle. I looked around at all the doors and windows and saw large locks on all of them. I was trapped. As fast as I could, I grabbed a nearby rolling pin and threw it at the glass door. All it did was humorously bounce off like some kind of cartoon. The look of worry only grew on the deranged family's faces. I took one step towards them with the rolling pin in my hand. They could see the rage in my eyes. In a split second, David jumped up and ran to me, tying my hands behind my back with a twist tie before I had any time to react. He sat me down at the table to eat with them, ensuring I was tied to the chair as well as my wrist being bound. They went on talking and acting like everything was normal. After they were done eating, Linda brought out a scrapbook and set it down on the table. She began to flip through the pages and explain them to me. It was the pictures I saw from the night before, except the full pictures. The spots that were cut out from corners before now had me in them. Can someone please just tell me what is going on? Who is Abby, and why am I in all these pictures? I begged. The family all exchanged looks, and David spoke. Listen, Abby, I know you were gone for a couple of years. I know you went through a lot while you were missing, and it's a lot to adjust to, but we are here for you. I'm just so happy to have my sister back. Excuse me? You're what? You gotta be kidding me, I yelled. You are a sick freak. What is happening? I struggled to get out of the chair with no success. I just fell to the ground while I kicked and screamed. Eventually, they left the room and started on other duties around the home. I got tired of the struggle and laid still on the slick kitchen floor with my cheek pressed against the ground. Sitting in my own sorrow, I thought I would come up with a plan, but nothing. Soon David came to me. He lifted my chair up and sat in front of me. This is what you wanted, David whispered. What are you on? How on earth is this what I wanted? I whispered back. A family. You wanted a family. You never had a real one. I knew you craved it. We lost someone in the family, and you needed to find a new one. It only makes sense. Yes, of course I wanted a family. I wanted to make a family. I wanted to have kids with you, David. I wanted to marry you and start over with you. I didn't want you to be my brother. How does this make any sense to you? Please let me go. This isn't what I want. I begged. You can't deny this. You saw the picture. You are the spitting image of Abby. You might as well be here. It's like she never fell down those steps. You are sick. You killed her, didn't you? I said as he leaned back in his chair with a smirk. I didn't kill anyone. You are right here, Abby. We missed you so badly while you were gone. He stood up and walked out of the kitchen. After sitting in the chair all day, they came to untie me. I made up my mind after sitting in the chair for so long that I would just go along with everything until I found an escape plan. They slowly freed me but stayed close by, waiting for me to run or try and hurt them, but instead I sat and smiled at them. It's so nice to be home again, I said, hoping they would fall for my insincerity as they all made eye contact. We are so happy to have you home, David said with relief. The family all shuffled off to their own bedrooms and shut the doors. I figured I would do the same. I rubbed my tired eyes as I walked. When I made it to the staircase, I was still where I stood, studying the pattern on the carpet, trying to see if any blood stains from Abby still remained. I looked at the top of the steps, imagining what actually happened to that poor girl. What was the truth? Are they delusional thinking they can actually replace her, or do they feel so guilty they feel like they had to? With every creak of the wood as I walked up the steps, I swore I could hear her final screams. I made it back to my room. Abby's room, and found a phone on the nightstand. It had no password, so I was able to get in. It's probably no surprise, but it was Abby's. My phone is nowhere to be found. I am stuck with hers. I tried calling 911, but the line just rings and rings. I have no numbers memorized to call and help me. I was an idiot and didn't tell anyone where I was going. My coworkers will notice I am gone, but not care enough to look and have no clue where to tell the police to look. I'm hundreds of miles away from my job. No family members care enough to come looking for me or even notice that I'm gone. The only people who care about me are these psychopaths trying to gaslight me. The thing that hurts me the most is this was supposed to be my chosen family. I was supposed to get married. That's all I wanted, and they could vet had it too. But it wasn't enough for them. They couldn't have a new daughter-in-law, but they had to have a daughter. The daughter they lost. The daughter they killed. I'm posting this here with Abby's phone because I don't know who else I can ask. I'm crossing my fingers that this somehow gets posted despite some technical issues I've had. The plan is to lay low for a while. Maybe try and run once I earn some trust. I would be running for a long time before finding help. This isn't what I had in mind when David asked me to spend the rest of my life with him. People don't believe I had a brother. When people ask now if I'm an only child, I lie and tell them yes. Growing up, of course, I told them the truth. I have a brother named Mark. He's 6 years younger than me and my best friend. That was true then, and it's still true now. The difference is the world won't believe me anymore. There was a time when I tried to convince people, raise a stink about it, convince people I wasn't crazy. That landed me in 72-hour observation, and that almost cost me my life. So, now I just lie. It's easier and safer. I've even taken to lying to myself. People can convince themselves of most anything after all, and I have this feeling that me talking about it, even thinking about it, might help them find me again, maybe for the last time. This account will, if everything goes as planned, be the last time I will have to deeply think or talk about this ever again. I have no illusions that I'll ever believe the world is safe or sane again. How could I? But at least I might be able to float along the surface, a small leaf not making waves, trying desperately to not be noticed and pulled underneath. I should probably start with our lives growing up. They weren't anything remarkable. Our father worked for a security company. Our mother was a psychiatrist. We lived in a nicer than average neighborhood and probably lived nicer than average lives. Our parents were good at most things. They were good at their jobs. They were good neighbors, good friends, and they were really good parents too. That's really important for me to get across. They weren't perfect and they were a little strict, but not in a mean or shitty way. Mark and I loved and respected them, and we knew they felt the same way about us. When I moved away for college, I legit missed home, and not just because of Mark or my other friends. Mom and Dad were my friends too, and most weeks I'd call them for a few minutes, if I didn't manage to make a trip back to see them all. Mark was the same way. I was already working a job I hated by the time he was a freshman, and I couldn't help but laugh when we were talking on the phone one night and I could tell he was homesick. I wanted to make fun but didn't quite dare. It was too hypocritical, even if I was missing a chance to rag on him. Because I wasn't that different than him even then. I looked forward to holidays and weekends we could all get together, especially as time and life in general made those times fewer and farther between. By the time I was 28 and Mark was graduating college, I only got to see them all a few times a year. Mark was still going more regularly, and there was a part of me that was jealous of how close he'd stayed with them, even though I knew it would probably change for him over time just like it had for me. They'd always invite me to stuff, of course, and they'd tell me funny stories about it, but they understood that I was far away and busy with work and day-to-day life. I'd already been planning on making a trip out to see them the next month when Mark called me one morning. That was already weird. Mark never called that early unless something was wrong. I knew he'd gone home that past weekend, so I wondered if something had happened or was wrong with Mom or Dad. Keeping my tone even, I answered the call. "Hey Dumble, what's up?" A pause and then, "Yeah, hey, nothing too much. I have a final this afternoon, so I thought I'd do some laundry and call you." I snorted, faking cheer though my chest still felt tight. "Surprised your lazy ass is up this early. It's like before 10, dude." I let it hang there for a moment, and when he didn't respond, I pushed on. "Is everything okay?" I heard him let out a long breath on the other side, like he'd developed a slow leak. "I don't know, man. I've been debating calling you since I got back in the car and started driving back to school on Saturday. Mom and Dad, something isn't right with them." I felt myself frowning as I gripped the phone a bit tighter. "Like what? Are they sick or something?" "No. I mean, I don't think so." When he fell silent again, I prodded further. "Are they fighting? Acting senile? Like what's the deal? You're freaking me out, and not giving me much to work with." "Shit. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry, I don't know how to put it into words and not sound dumb or crazy. That's part of why I haven't called before now." I swallowed. Okay. I promise to not prejudge anything you say until I hear everything, okay? And I promise to not give you any shit." "Yeah, okay. Well, it started when I got there. Like I didn't get in until after midnight, and I figured Mom would still be up, but usually Dad would be in bed already. This time they were both up and waiting. That was unusual, but so what, right? But from the moment I walked in, things were off. They were still nice enough. They said they missed me. They asked about school, that kind of thing. But none of it seemed genuine. It was like all the nice stuff and politeness and being friendly were just fake. Kind of like, have you ever walked on thick carpet when it's really cold, in your bare feet? I blinked. Yeah, I guess. Why? It's like that. Like when you walk on that carpet, you can feel the carpet sure, but you can also feel the colder floor underneath. It was like that. They felt cold underneath their questions and their smiles, like strangers. Shit, Mark. I don't know, maybe they had been fighting and just didn't want you to know, so they faked being happy, and that's what you picked up on. Yeah, maybe. But it wasn't just that. After I talked to them for a bit, I went to my room to go to bed. At that point, I thought they were acting weird, but I wasn't actively freaked out or anything, and I was really tired. So at first, I fell right asleep. But a couple of hours later, I just woke up suddenly. I don't know if it was a dream or what, but when I woke up, I realized the house smelled different. Like it had smelled that way since I got there, but I hadn't really registered it with everything else being weird until just then, sitting up in my bed. I could feel my heart beating faster, though I wasn't sure why. What did it smell like? I don't know, it was like a spicy smell. It didn't really burn my nose, but it felt like it was twisting its way up into my brain or something. It wasn't a good smell, or a normal smell. Okay, did you ever ask? I'm not done with that yet. So like I wake up and I'm looking around even though it's super dark and I'm smelling this weird smell and I'm afraid, like actually afraid, like I'm a little kid. I don't know why or how, but some part of me is yelling like it senses danger. Instead of getting out of bed or reaching over and turning on a light, I just get quiet and still, like very, very still. I may have even held my breath for a minute. I don't know why I reacted like that, but I did, and that's when I heard it. My palm felt sweaty against the back of my phone. Heard what? The sound of my door, like the latch. It was clicking. Someone was outside my door, had opened my door. Maybe that's what woke me up. I don't know, but they waited there, not moving or saying anything, until they thought I was asleep again, and then they closed it back. I mean, it was probably one of them coming in to say something and then realizing you were asleep and not wanting to bother you. His voice was trembling a little when he spoke next. Jake, my door. I started getting in the habit in college, and I'm still in the habit now. I didn't even think about it until the next morning, but I always lock my door now. And I remember locking it that night. It was out of habit mostly, but I remember locking it. Do you fucking think Mom and Dad would do that? I held my breath a moment as I tried to think of some excuse or explanation. No, you're right, but I mean what? Do you think someone else was in there, like a burglar or something? I don't know, but I don't think so. Didn't leave my room the next morning until like 11, and they were both out in the living room waiting for me. Trying to act like they should, but not quite pulling it off. I hung out for like an hour and then faked getting a call. A friend had an emergency and I had to go ahead and leave. So you really left on Saturday? Yup. You never leave until Sunday late. A shaky laugh and then nope. Fuck. Okay. So like, have you talked to them since then? Just a text to let them know I got back. Okay. I got a short response, but that's it. And I haven't pushed it. I don't really want to talk to them, at least not until after I talk to you. Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, fuck. I don't know. Do you think I should talk to them? The fear in his voice was high and crackling when he responded. No. I mean, I don't want to tip them off that I noticed anything. Not yet, at least. I was hoping you could go back there with me, see if you see what I see. Tell me if I'm being crazy. I mean, I'm planning on going there in a few weeks. So, no, not that far off. I think it needs to happen soon. I don't want them to notice I'm not coming as much, and I'm not comfortable going until this is figured out, whatever the answer is. Plus, there's something else. I was about to remind him that I didn't have as flexible a schedule as him and that I couldn't just drop everything for something so minor as he thought our parents were acting weird, but the tone of his voice caught the words in my throat. What's the other thing? I think they want you to come. They always talk about you and want you to come more, but just like everything else, it was different this time. They kept bringing it up, about how you should come soon, we should both come and stay for a few days together. It didn't strike me as much at the time, but I think they meant it. I had the sudden thought that one of them was sick, cancer or something, and it was making them both weird, that they wanted us together to tell it all at once. I tried to keep my voice even. Yeah, sure, let's go this weekend. I ran late, so I expected Mark to already be inside when I got to our parents' house. but when I texted him that I was only about 10 minutes out, he was quick to respond. Okay, I'm waiting outside in my car. I felt something grow heavy in my stomach. Seriously, what was this? He hadn't said he just got there too, just that he was waiting outside. And why wait at all if you're already there? A small voice whispered in the back of my head. Because he's scared of them. Clenching my teeth, I sped up a little. When I pulled into the driveway, my headlights cut across the house and parking pad, flashing on Mark's face, staring out at me from inside his car. Pushing away the voice, I parked and got out, meeting him in the space between our cars and giving him a quick hug. Hey man, so you really waited until I got here, huh? I tried to leave it at that, but couldn't quite do it. How long have you been out here? He looked pale and tired, dark circles under eyes that darted toward the house before lighting back on me. Like a couple of hours. I was worried they'd come out, but they haven't. I frowned. Are you sure they're even home? Mark glanced at the house again, licking his lips nervously. They're in there. I've seen them moving around. Well, shadows moving. I nodded, reaching out to give his shoulder a pat. Well, let's go in and see how they are, right? Like we talked about, I'm not going to call them out on anything, just watch and listen. Then me and you will talk about it. Sound good? He nodded slightly. Yeah, I guess so. I didn't hesitate and headed toward the front door. I could grab my bag from the trunk, but the thought didn't even occur to me. I wanted to get this over with, see that everything was okay and that he was overreacting, that they weren't sick or crazy or, well, anything. Just our friends and parents, same as they'd always been. When the door opened, I felt something twist inside me. Mom and Dad were both standing there, smiling and laughing, watching us expectantly while ushering us through the door. It wasn't just that I'd never seen them open the door together other than maybe at Halloween when they both dressed up for trick-or-treaters. It wasn't any one thing. It was everything. The way they moved, the look in their eyes. And Mark was right. There was some undersmell throughout the house that hadn't been there before. It was faint, but there, spicy, and a little sour at the same time, corkscrewing through the more familiar smells of home like a thin twist of barbed wire. Making small talk as we all went into the living room, I could barely hear what we were saying for the thudding of my heart in my ears. I looked between them, terrified that they could somehow hear the thunder inside me. But no, their eyes roved between me and Mark as they asked about work and anyone we were dating and what was wrong with them. Their eyes were dead as an anglerfish, flashing this way and that, conveying nothing real except for some kind of terrible patience. I had to be wrong, didn't I? These were our parents, for fuck's sake, and even if something was wrong, we needed to... Steven, did you hear me? This was Dad, looking expectantly at me. Sorry, what was that? He nodded and smiled. No, I guess you're probably beat after that drive. Was just asking if you'd help us out in the basement in the morning. We've been clearing things out down there. Your mother has the idea to renovate and reclaim as she puts it. Need the two of you to help finish it out tomorrow. I blinked and then returned his nod. Yeah, sure, that'd be fine. Standing up, I fought the urge to run. Somehow that sudden instinct scared me more than anything else so far. It wasn't fanciful or fueled by an overactive imagination. It was a base instinct that said there was danger here, and I needed to escape. Instead, I swallowed as I wiped my hands on my jeans and forced laughter I didn't feel. I think you're right, Dad. I'm pretty beat. Mark, mind helping me get my stuff out of the car? I forgot to bring anything in with me. Mark sprang to his feet, nodding. I could tell he was as freaked out as I was, which made me worried they'd notice something soon if they hadn't already. We needed to talk outside and get our shit together before being around them again. Sure, man. He gave them a nervous glance. Well, be right back. We were halfway to my car when I dared to speak in a low voice. You're right, something's really wrong. I saw Mark tense in front of me, but to his credit he kept walking and didn't turn around. I know, I was worried, and also hoping that it would be normal this time, but it's not. He stopped at my car's trunk and glanced back at me. What do we do? I met his eyes for a moment and unlocked the trunk. I'm going to stay and try to figure out what this is. I think you should go back. I can call you when I've had more time with them. He grabbed my arm, and when I turned to him, his face was set in a deep frown. You're scared, aren't you? That's why you don't want me to stay. I wanted to lie to him, but looking at him I could tell there was no point. A little? Yeah, I don't know why. Probably it's nothing, but maybe they've gone crazy or something. It sounds dumb, but that doesn't mean it isn't possible. People, even couples, do go crazy and hurt people sometimes. Well, it's not going to be anything like that. It may just be our imagination still, though I don't think it's that either. But whatever it is, I don't trust it. We have to figure it out and help them. But that doesn't mean we both need to be here. He was already shaking his head.
No.
Fuck that. They're my parents too, and I'm not leaving you alone with them. Not when things are like this. We both go or we both stay and watch each other's backs. I stared at him for a moment, again fighting the urge to leave. Okay, we stay then. Lock our doors and block them too, and then we'll see what things look like in the morning. Handing him my laptop bag, I held onto it a moment, meeting his eyes. You okay with that? He nodded. Yeah, it'll be fine. They're our parents, right? I winced at the scraping sounds my old dresser made as I slid it over in front of the door. It was largely empty at this point, but it was still heavy and unwieldy enough that I half expected someone to knock on my door asking what I was doing in there. Once it was snugly against the locked door, I waited, breath held and ears pricked up for any sound. Nothing. Letting out a shaky breath, I went over to the bed and pulled back the covers, checking under them before getting in. I could tell they had been changed recently and they smelled decently fresh, but it was hard to tell anything for sure with that damned other smell everywhere I went. What was that? It didn't smell like anything I remembered ever running across before, but something about it still put me on edge. Then again, I could say that about so much at the moment. Everything was disorienting and strange, including sleeping in my old bed at 28, afraid of something coming to get me in the dark. Because that was the truth, wasn't it? I was afraid. I felt a stir of embarrassed irritation at the thought. Afraid of fucking what? My old house smelling weird? My sweet aging parents? But my attempt at distracting anger died quickly at the thought of them that night, doing and saying all the normal things in abnormal ways, lost in some uncanny valley of feigned familiarity, close enough to be intentional and wrong enough to be malign. That thought spun off into another. What if they knew they were off? They were doing it intentionally, or at least recognized our fear and unease, and found it funny. What if this was... I woke up in darkness. Heart thudding. I sat up and felt around me. It seemed like I was still in my old bed, and a little bit of light coming through the window seemed to confirm this. But why was the room so dark? Had I turned off the light beside the bed? I didn't think so, but maybe when I was half asleep. Reaching out, I fumbled in the black air for the lamp switch for a moment before finding it. Twisting it, I started looking around the room, first in every direction and then more carefully. Was everything the same? Any sign that anyone had? I froze and lowered my eyes immediately, holding still for another moment before forcing myself to casually look for my phone. It was still in my pants pocket, and when I dug it out, I saw a missed text from Mark about 20 minutes earlier. You awake? I texted back carefully, trying to keep my hands from visibly shaking. I am now. Sorry, I fell asleep. You okay? Almost immediately, he responded. Yeah, I think. I was starting to get sleepy, but I heard something a few minutes ago. Sounded like it came from the air vents. Quiet now, though. Maybe it was a dream. Shuddering, I risked a glance over my phone at the high vent on the far wall. The gleams of light I'd seen from inside that vent were still there, slightly brighter than before. Closer. I hadn't been wrong. It wasn't a dream. Something is in the vent. I think I can see its eyes. Oh God, do you want me to come over? I found myself shaking my head to an empty room before I shakily texted back, eyes darting now between my phone and the vent. It was still there. No, you couldn't in anyway without me moving stuff and unlocking. I think we need go now. I don't know what this is, but we need to go. Okay, how? I sucked in a breath as I heard the ductwork in the far wall groan as weight shifted up there. Was it closer? I wasn't sure. I was afraid to look too long in case it didn't know I saw it yet. Whatever we did, it had to be fast. Windows? Meet outside at cars? They're nailed shut now. I checked already tonight. We'd have to break them. I forced myself to take a deep breath. I was acting like a child, wasn't I? What if there wasn't anything up in the vent? Maybe I was seeing some reflection that had always been there, I'd forgotten, or some piece of tape or insulation had gotten moved and was catching the light. Or at worst, maybe a mouse, looking at me, as scared as I am. It was an old house after all. Another groan in the ductwork, and I saw the thing push forward this time, sliding up to within an inch of the vent grate itself. Oh God. It was my father's face, pressed and squeezed into an impossibly small rectangle, his eyes shiny and bulging from the compressed mass. Those eyes met mine, and I heard a wet, creaky sound that might have been a laugh. Go now. Meet in the hall and we go together. I leapt off the bed and slung the dresser aside, fighting with the knob for a second to unlock the door, sure I was going to get caught from behind at any moment. Flinging open the door, I ran out into the hallway and headed for Mark's room. I was reaching for the handle just as it opened, Mark rushing out into me hard enough that we careened into the far hallway wall before righting ourselves and running down the hall toward the front door. Mom stepped out in front of us from their bedroom, grin wide on her face as her eyes flicked between us like a metronome. "Look at my boys. Together again. Eager beavers." She giggled to herself before looking past us. "Aren't you proud of them, honey?" Our father's voice boomed behind us. I am. We raised them right. Taught them to give back. Here they are, ready to help in the basement before the sun is even up." Spinning around, I saw him, naked and smeared with dust, grinning at us, his bruised-looking erection poking out from the nest of gray hair surrounding its base. When Mark grabbed my arm, I almost screamed. Turning to him, it struck me how much he looked like a kid, terrified eyes filling with tears, looking for me to protect him. Anger starting burning through my fear. Whatever this was, they were going to fucking let us go, even if I had to hurt them. Reaching down, I gave his hand a pat. "Don't worry, Dumble. This'll be okay. We're leaving." I glared at the thing that looked like our father. Now, I still wonder if I really thought that was true when I said it, or if it was just some comforting lie I was telling us both. Not that it really matters. There was no way I could understand what was about to happen. After all, standing in that hallway between the two of them, I'd never been more terrified or enraged in my life. Thought it was impossible to be more afraid. I was very, very wrong. I heard Mark scream at the same time that pain flared through my entire body, dropping me to my knees. It had come from behind, so it had to be Mom, but what had she done? Gasping for breath, I turned toward Mark to see her over him, stabbing his neck with a hard jab of her fingertips. He let out another wail and crumpled into a ball on the floor, whether because he couldn't stand or just trying to avoid another attack. She must have been satisfied at his collapse, because she turned toward me. Her hand was still flat and pointed, and she raised her arm as though readying another impossibly fast strike at my neck or head. There was no smile on her face now, just the hard focus of a predator in the moments before a kill. A part of me feared that, but I was also distracted by how she had changed. Some of it was her speed and movement. She had a quick precision to her motions, now that reminded me more of a mantis than an older woman. And then there was her skin. It looked waxy and slick in places, maybe all over, but there were also wisps of something trailing off her skin at various places. The first thought I had was that she'd walked through some cobwebs, but no, it was all over. Thin, gauzy filaments clinging to her flesh like moss, shifting in the air with every sudden movement she made. I was still staring at her when she lowered her hand and spoke to me. "Are you going to behave, or do I have to hurt you like your brother?" The mention of Mark broke me free from my terrified stupor enough to glare at her. "Leave him alone. Just please let us leave." Our father's voice thundered out from above us. "You aren't going anywhere but the basement. We've waited long enough." I looked up to see him standing over me, leering down with eyes that were pitiless and strange. Between us, his grotesque members still stabbed out at the air, and below them, what might be his weakest point. Gritting my teeth, I rammed my fist up into his testicles as hard as I could, given the angle and the pain still flaring across my neck and shoulders. He grunted slightly but didn't stagger or even cry out, and when I tried to hit him again, he kicked me hard enough in the ribs that I felt something give way as new agony filled my left side. "Want back in there? That's not the way." I heard him and Mom cackling as I started sliding across the carpet. One of them had grabbed my legs, and when I looked around I saw they were dragging Mark too. I wanted to kick them off, get Mark, and try to run again, but my limbs didn't want to work and I couldn't get any breath. I thought about talking to them again, but I knew there was no point. And Mark was so still, I was starting to wonder if she had knocked him out or even killed him. Maybe it was better if she had. We were almost to the basement. Mark's eyes sprang open as he twisted onto his back and kicked hard with both of his feet, landing them both squarely in Mom's chest and sending her flying through the basement doorway and down the stairs. Dad roared in anger, and I tried to use the chance to kick him too, but he just yanked me sideways into the wall while reaching down to grab one of Mark's legs at the ankle. His angry yelling curdled into laughter as he pulled Mark closer and then stomped down on his knee, breaking his leg backward at the joint as Mark squealed and fell silent. Our father flung him down into the dark of the basement before grabbing me up again and following. I was screaming, of course, threatening to kill them, crying, begging, doing all the things to reset a world that had gone insane. I barely felt the rough slaps of the steps as I was drugged down there, or the cold concrete at the edge of the ruin they'd created. My eyes roved everywhere in the murky light of the basement, seeing more than I thought I would, more than I wanted. That part of the house had once been for storage boxes of decorations and old clothes, furniture that wasn't needed but hadn't been sold or given away. Keepsakes and abandoned hobbies and reminders of bits of past life, largely shed but not completely forsaken. Now it was all destroyed. Most had been shredded and beaten into a rough ring around the middle of the room, but as you went toward the center, the scraps of cloth and paper, wood and metal, they all grew smaller and more fine. Mounds of dirt and trash littered the middle, pressed down by use and black with filth and moisture, and I knew right away what it was. A nest. My eyes landed on Mark again. Mom, bloodied but otherwise fine after her fall, had dragged him into the center and was stripping away his clothes. I tried to scream at them again, but all that came out was a small wheezing whine. Please God, please let him be dead already. Our father came to stand over him as Mom receded to his head, stroking her youngest child's brow as her husband got down on all fours. Her skin was thick with that webby gauze now, almost like feathers in this dim light. She started to sing, still stroking Mark's hair like a loving mother as Dad's face split apart. It wasn't his entire head, just the lower half, the jaw protruding and splitting apart at the chin, spreading wide to reveal black gums and 2 rows of gray molars on each side. He paused a moment, looking up at me from beneath his bushy eyebrows, the same eyebrows Mark had always had, and he laughed at me. At us. At all of this. And then he bent down to take a bite. He went around Mark's entire body, he bit through half of one thigh, ate the other foot, ate both hands, and turned him over to tear off a buttock. These weren't savage or random attacks. He sniffed deeply before nearly every bite, seemed to consider, and sometimes he moved on to another spot. Other times he seemed satisfied, and there he buried his teeth into my brother's flesh. It was only when he was chewing thoughtfully on one of Mark's cheeks that his face began to run together again, and when he had swallowed the last, he looked at me again. This is all confusing for you, because all you know is taking, feeding on the life of the world around you, expecting everything, expecting us to just give and give and give until we are dried up and you have moved on. Even if I could have spoken then, I wouldn't have had any words. My mind was almost completely gone, barely able to do more than record what was happening to burn it into my heart. Snuffling. I only managed a small animal sound. Guh! Mom snickered as she stood up. She had stayed at her station while Dad ate his part, and now she was stripping down herself, peeling off wet pajamas to reveal sagging breasts cocooned in more thick strands, stained red with my brother's blood. I had the thought that he hadn't bled enough for all that had been taken, the desperate hope that it was because his heart had already stopped. We slow the blood. Dead meat is worthless. This was our mother. Dad had gone to her old spot at Mark's head as she stood naked near what remained of his legs. You are both worth far more than that, at least to us. Your father has taken back from your brother, taken the places where the smell of his seed was strongest. Hell do the same to you. Me too, of course. She looked down at the bloody ruin of her youngest, with a small, almost shy smile. But first I have to take my baby back. Spreading her legs wide, I saw the cleave between them grow, jagged yellow canines pushing out from between the lips and the broader fissure that ran up to her navel and lower back. Crouching low like a spider, she began pulling him into her even as our father pushed and helped the feeding along. I might have sat there, transfixed by that impossible horror until it was my turn. But then something more terrible happened. Mark opened his eyes. He didn't make a sound, just stared at me. No, not stared. He looked at me, saw me, and begged me to look away, to get away, to let his last sight be me escaping hell. I don't remember getting up or making it out of the house without getting caught. Maybe I was just too fast, or they couldn't stop what they had started, or maybe they just didn't care if they stopped me. I know that I was over 100 miles away when I came back to myself, screaming and crying behind the wheel of my car. I was still stomping the pedal, but the engine was dead. I'd run out of gas. I got out and stumbled into the woods. My side was still killing me, but adrenaline was keeping me going, even if I was too confused and terrified to make a plan or do anything but hide from every passing car. That lasted for a few hours, I think, though I'm not sure. Then one of the times I woke up from being asleep or unconscious, I could focus a bit more, enough to know I couldn't stay there, that I needed to get to a hospital, that I wasn't safe out there alone. So I went back to the road and tried to flag down a car. No one would stop. Not that I blamed them given how I must have looked, but I had to get help, had to get farther away. Gritting my teeth, I hit my fist into my thigh in frustration. That's when I first realized I still had my cell phone in my pants. An hour later, I was in an ER trying to tell a believable lie about how I had fallen and tried to drive myself to a hospital but ran out of gas. I don't think anyone believed me, but between my concussion, broken ribs, and punctured lung, they weren't going to push it for the time being. I was there for 5 days, and the entire time I was conscious I was terrified my parents were going to walk through the door. Every time they dosed me or I fell asleep from exhaustion, I'd wake up certain I was back in that basement again. On the 6th day, I checked myself out. The doctors and nurses didn't like it, but I didn't give them a choice. I wasn't safe there, and I had to be well hidden before I could really sleep and try to get my head together. There'd been no sign of my parents so far, and my phone had been silent except for a few friends from back home, but that didn't mean anything. They were still out there, and eventually they would come for me. So I spent the next 2 weeks moving between different motels, slowly migrating back to my hometown without actually going home. Once I was close enough, I spent a week watching my house for signs of them before I'd go near it. The next week I went back to work, retelling my original lie to them that I'd been hit by a car while visiting family the month before. I really was careful, and maybe it did actually help. I don't know. Looking back, it was stupid for me to try going back to my old life at all. But you have to understand, I was so adrift, barely sane. I'd halfway hold it together at work and then cry in my car on the way home. I'd put locks on every door inside my house, but I still spent most nights sleeping in my locked closet with a shotgun next to me. And that was just the trauma of what I remembered. What was worse were the days when I thought I'd just gone crazy, imagined it all, or maybe hurt my parents or Mark in some kind of psychotic fit, imagining they were monsters and that they killed and ate him. Didn't that make more sense than what I remembered to be true? And I hadn't heard from Mark or our parents since. Had I? Maybe because they were all dead. I almost called them several times. Almost talked to the police once or twice. In the end, it was the purity and clarity of my memories, the potency of that poison in not only my mind but my heart, that convinced me that it was the world that had gone insane. Maybe that should have been comforting, but it wasn't. Instead of sleeping with my shotgun as my protector, I started cradling it like a lover, 6 months out, and I had already put the end of the barrel in my mouth twice. It was that second time that did it. Some remnant of that old anger came back, the thought that if I gave in, it was just them killing me slow, me letting them win, me letting Mark down. So instead, I went to a psychiatrist. The first session I kept everything very vague and dishonest. Second and third, more honest, but no real details about some traumatic family incident in my recent past that was really bothering me. Fourth session, it wasn't because I trusted the guy that much more, or even liked him, but I had to get it out before it killed me. So I told him about it. Everything. Everything I've told you so far. And he listened, only interrupting once or twice to clarify something. And when I was done, he studied me for better than a minute before clearing his throat. And all of this you just told me. You are being honest with me? This all happened just like you said? This isn't some joke or test, or just a story. I shook my head, holding his gaze. I swear to God, it all happened. He nodded. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that with me. It's a lot to take in, of course, and we're just about out of time. Let me process it, and we'll discuss next time, okay? I felt disappointment, but that was dwarfed by the release of telling it to someone else, even a practical stranger. Smiling, I stood up. I am really not crazy. I just thank you for listening. He stood up and returned my smile. Sure, that's what I'm here for. See you soon. I was almost home when I saw the patrol car's lights behind me. I hadn't thought I was speeding, but maybe I hadn't been paying enough attention. When the deputy came to the window, I could tell something more was wrong. The doctor had called it in. Said there was a strong chance I was a danger and that I needed emergency observation. I could have tried fighting the deputy, but what would have been the point? It would just let them keep me longer. So I went along as calm and rational acting as I could manage, and by that night I was in a psychiatric hospital. Past me would have been terrified of even the idea of that. But now, my pulse barely raised as a pleasant elderly orderly guided me down a series of halls to my room. Not too bad here, and the food's pretty good. You'll be fine. But you're out of here by the weekend. He turned to smile at me as he unlocked a door and gestured me in. Here's your room. Gertie will be by with dinner in about half an hour, and I'll see if I can rustle you up some books or magazines. I nodded. Okay, thanks. I may just sleep. He returned the nod and started to close the door. Well, keep your chin up. It'll turn out all right. His eyes brightened as he remembered something. Oh, and good news. While you were getting processed, we got a call. You've got visitors tomorrow. Jerking. I stared at him. What? Yeah. They told me right before I came to get you. Your parents are coming. That's it for tonight's stories. But the nightmares never end. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a new upload. Got a scary experience of your own? Share it in the comments. I just might feature it in a future video. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember some things are scarier than they seem in the dark.